What would you do if you were the last security guard in an abandoned hospital, and every night at 3:47 a.m. the building came back to life around you? In 2019, a final night shift in Detroit turned into a nightmare when the past refused to stay buried. These stories are 100% real accounts that will make you question everything you thought you knew about the supernatural. Drop your location and what time you're watching in the comments below, and subscribe to Haunted Fears for more true horror stories that will haunt your nights. What would you do if you were the last security guard in an abandoned hospital, and every night at 3:47 a.m. the building came back to life around you? In 2019, a final night shift in Detroit turned into a nightmare when the past refused to stay buried. I never believed in ghosts. 23 years in security, banks, warehouses, corporate offices, and the scariest thing I'd ever encountered was a raccoon in a loading dock. So when I took the contract for St. Mary's Hospital's final week before demolition, I thought it would be easy money. The building had been abandoned since 2008. Windows boarded up, equipment stripped and sold off. Just me, my flashlight, and a thermos of coffee walking empty hallways until the wrecking crew arrived Monday morning. That's what I thought anyway. St. Mary's sat on the east side of Detroit, a massive 7-story brick structure that had served the community since 1926. In its prime, it had been a beacon of hope, babies born, lives saved, families reunited. But like so much of Detroit, economic collapse and population flight had killed it slowly. The hospital limped along until 2008 when they finally pulled the plug. For 11 years, it sat empty, a monument to better times. Now, in October 2019, the city had finally approved demolition. My job was simple: make sure no copper thieves or urban explorers got inside during those final nights. The first 2 nights were exactly what I expected. Silence, darkness, the occasional creak of old pipes settling. I walked my rounds every hour, ground floor, basement, up to the 7th floor and back down. My flashlight beam cutting through the dark was the only light in the entire building. The power had been cut years ago. Everything was still, dead, forgotten. The 3rd night, everything changed. I arrived at 10 p.m. as usual. The October air was crisp, and fallen leaves crunched under my boots as I approached the main entrance. The heavy chains and padlock were exactly as I'd left them that morning. I unlocked them, stepped inside, and secured the door behind me. My footsteps echoed in the main lobby, once grand with marble floors and mahogany information desks, now just empty space with peeling paint and water-stained ceilings. I settled into my usual spot in what had been the security office near the main entrance. A folding chair, my duffel bag with snacks and extra batteries, and a paperback novel to pass the time between rounds. At 11 p.m., I did my first walkthrough. Everything normal. At midnight, same thing. At 1 a.m., I checked the basement. Old boiler room, laundry facilities, morgue, all clear. At 2 a.m., I was back in the security office, halfway through a sandwich, when I heard it. A distant sound, faint but unmistakable. A telephone ringing. I froze mid-bite. That was impossible. The phone lines had been disconnected in 2008. There was no power, no active utilities. But the ringing continued. A old-fashioned mechanical bell, the kind you don't hear anymore, in this age of digital tones. It was coming from somewhere above me, maybe the 3rd or 4th floor. I grabbed my flashlight and headed for the stairwell. The ringing stopped before I reached the 2nd floor. I stood in the darkness, listening. Nothing. Just my own breathing and the pounding of my heart. I convinced myself it was nothing. Maybe a sound from outside, carried strangely through the empty building. Old structures do weird things with acoustics. I continued up to the 4th floor anyway, checking each nurse's station, each room. Empty. Silent. I returned to the security office and tried to focus on my book, but I couldn't shake the unease settling into my bones. At 3:47 a.m., the building came alive. It started with the lights. Every fluorescent fixture in the hallway outside the security office flickered on simultaneously, bathing everything in that harsh, institutional white light. I jumped to my feet, my chair clattering backward. That was impossible. No power, no electricity. But the lights were blazing, humming with that familiar fluorescent buzz. Then I heard voices, multiple voices, footsteps running, a PA system crackling to life. Code Blue, OR3, Code Blue, OR3. The announcement echoed through the building, urgent and clear. My hands were shaking as I stepped into the hallway. The lights were so bright after 3 nights of darkness that I had to squint. Down the corridor, I saw them. People. Medical staff in scrubs rushing past, wheeling a gurney. I saw a woman in blue scrubs, a man in a white coat, another pushing an IV stand. They moved with purpose and urgency, completely ignoring me as they raced toward the elevator bank. "Hey!" I shouted. "Hey, you can't be in here." They didn't respond, didn't even glance my way. The elevator dinged, an elevator in a building with no power, and the doors slid open. The medical team pushed the gurney inside and the doors closed. I watched the floor indicator light up. 3, 4, 5. They were heading to the 5th floor. My training kicked in through the shock. Trespassers in the building. I had to confront them, get them out. I radioed my supervisor but got only static, no signal. I ran for the stairwell and started climbing, taking the steps 2 at a time. By the time I burst through the 5th floor stairwell door, I was breathing hard. The hallway stretched before me, every light blazing. I could hear sounds now. Monitoring equipment beeping, ventilators hissing, muffled conversations behind closed doors. Room numbers were clearly visible: 501, 502, 503. I moved down the corridor, my flashlight useless in my hand, forgotten. The sounds were coming from operating room 3. The door had a small window, and I approached slowly, every instinct screaming at me to run, but my feet carrying me forward anyway. I looked through the window. Inside, a full surgical team surrounded an operating table. Bright overhead lights illuminated the scene. I counted 6 people in surgical masks and gowns, their hands moving with practiced precision. On the table was a patient. I could see the white sheet, the monitors, the organized chaos of an emergency surgery in progress. One of the surgeons looked up, directly at me. His eyes met mine through the window. He didn't look surprised or concerned. He simply stared at me with an expression I couldn't read, then returned his attention to the patient. I tried the door handle, locked. I knocked, then pounded. "Hey, what's going on? This building is condemned." Nobody inside reacted. They continued working as if I didn't exist. The monitors beeped steadily. I could see the green line of an ECG, the numbers on a blood pressure display. Everything looked real, solid, present. Then the monitor flatlined. A steady, piercing tone filled the air, even through the heavy door. I watched as the team worked frantically. Chest compressions, defibrillator paddles charged and pressed to the patient's chest. Once, twice, 3 times. The ECG remained flat. One of the surgeons pulled his mask down. Time of death, 3:56 a.m. His voice was muffled but audible. The team stepped back from the table. That's when I saw the patient clearly for the first time. It was a man, probably mid-30s. His face was pale, eyes closed, peaceful. One of the nurses pulled the sheet up over his face. The lights went out. Not gradually, all at once. The entire floor plunged back into darkness so complete that for several seconds I couldn't see anything. My flashlight had fallen from my hand when I was pounding on the door. I fumbled for it in the dark, my fingers finally closing around the metal cylinder. I clicked it on with shaking hands. The beam illuminated the hallway. Silent now. No voices, no beeping monitors, no humming lights. I turned back to OR3 and shined my light through the window. Empty. No surgical team, no equipment, no patient. Just a bare room with dusty floors and a rusted operating table pushed against the wall. Cobwebs hung from the broken light fixtures. It looked like it hadn't been used in years. I don't remember getting back to the security office. I just remember sitting in my folding chair, staring at the wall, trying to process what I'd seen, trying to convince myself it was a hallucination, exhaustion, carbon monoxide from some hidden leak. Anything but what I knew it was. At 6 a.m., when the first light of dawn came through the boarded windows, I went back up to the 5th floor. In daylight, or what passed for it in the dim building, everything looked abandoned and decrepit. I found OR3 again. The door wasn't locked anymore. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was exactly as I'd seen it through my flashlight. Old, abandoned, forgotten. But on the dusty floor, I saw footprints. Multiple sets, fresh, leading from the doorway to the operating table and back. I knelt down and touched one. The dust came away on my finger. On the wall, someone had written in the dust, Warren, 3:56 a.m., October 23, 1987. I pulled out my phone. Still no signal, but the date display worked fine. October 23, 2019, exactly 32 years to the day. When I got home that morning, I did what I should have done before taking the job. I researched St. Mary's Hospital history. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. October 23, 1987, a patient named Warren Hollister had died during emergency surgery at 3:56 a.m. Complications from a car accident. The surgical team had done everything they could, but it wasn't enough. I also found something else. The surgeon who'd pronounced time of death, Otto Brennan, had committed suicide 3 months later. The two nurses assisting, Miriam Chen and Elise Patterson, had both left the medical profession within a year. The anesthesiologist, Lennox Burke, had transferred to a hospital in California and refused to ever speak about that night. Every single person in that operating room had been destroyed by whatever happened during that surgery. I called my supervisor and quit. Told him I was sick, family emergency, whatever excuse came to mind. I didn't care about the money. I wasn't spending another night in that building. But I had to know if it would happen again. I sat in my car across the street that night, watching the building. At 3:47 a.m., every window on the 5th floor blazed with light. I could see shadows moving inside, the unmistakable activity of a hospital in operation. It lasted exactly 9 minutes. At 3:56 a.m., the lights went out, and St. Mary's was dead and dark once more. The wrecking crew arrived Monday morning. I watched from a distance as the demolition began. It took 3 days to bring the building down. When it was over, all that remained was a pile of rubble and the ghosts of everyone who died within those walls. I never told anyone the full story of what happened during my third night. People would think I was crazy. Maybe I am. But I know what I saw. I know that building was replaying Warren's death, every detail perfect, every October 23rd at exactly 3:47 a.m. 32 years of the same 9 minutes, over and over, trapped in a loop of trauma and loss. Sometimes I wonder if demolishing the building freed those spirits or just scattered them. I wonder if Warren and Otto and the others finally found peace, or if they're still trying to save a life that was lost decades ago. I don't work security anymore. I took a job doing IT support, 9 to 5, fluorescent lights in cubicles. No more night shifts, no more empty buildings. Because I learned something during those 3 nights at St. Mary's Hospital. Some places remember. Some places hold on to their tragedies so tightly that they become part of the structure itself, replaying forever for anyone unlucky enough to witness them. And I learned that 3:47 a.m. is the loneliest, darkest hour of the night, when the boundary between past and present grows thin, and the dead don't stay buried. Imagine if you checked into a hotel room and felt yourself drowning every time you closed your eyes, then discovered every guest in that room for the past century died the exact same way. In 2017, a business trip to San Diego became a fight for survival against a force that had been killing for generations. I'm a pharmaceutical sales rep. My life is airports, rental cars, and hotel rooms. Always hotel rooms. I've stayed in hundreds of them across the country, from budget motels off the interstate to luxury high-rises in major cities. They're all the same to me: a bed, a shower, Wi-Fi, and checkout by 11. I never thought twice about where I slept, until room 311 at the Grand Colonial Hotel. The Grand Colonial is one of those old beauties that La Jolla is famous for. Built in 1913, all white columns and vintage charm, it sits just blocks from the ocean, with views that justify the premium rates. My company booked it for a 3-day medical conference in September 2017. I'd driven down from Los Angeles, exhausted from back-to-back client meetings, looking forward to a hot shower and room service. The lobby was exactly what you'd expect: crystal chandeliers, polished marble, staff in crisp uniforms. A young woman named Shiloh checked me in with a professional smile, but I noticed something odd. When she pulled up my reservation and saw the room number, her smile faltered for just a second. She glanced at her manager, an older man named Reed, who was helping another guest, then back at me. "Is there a problem?" I asked. "No, not at all, Mr. Paxton. You're in room 311, third floor, elevator to your right. Enjoy your stay." The hesitation bothered me, but I was too tired to press. I took my key card and wheeled my suitcase to the elevator. The third-floor hallway was decorated in period style: floral wallpaper, brass sconces, thick carpet that muffled footsteps. Room 311 was at the end of the hall, last door on the left. The room was beautiful: king bed with crisp white linens, antique dresser, writing desk by the window with an ocean view. The bathroom had been modernized but maintained the vintage aesthetic. Clawfoot tub, pedestal sink, black and white tile. It was perfect. I ordered dinner, answered some emails, and took a long shower. By 10 p.m. I was in bed, scrolling through my phone. The ocean breeze coming through the cracked window was cool and pleasant. I set my alarm for 6 a.m., plugged in my phone, and turned off the lights. The moment I closed my eyes, I was underwater. Not dreaming about water, not imagining it. I was submerged, water filling my nose and throat, lungs burning, arms flailing in panic. I couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. The pressure was crushing my chest, and I was sinking into darkness. I jolted upright, gasping and coughing. My heart hammered against my ribs. The room was dark and dry and normal. No water. I was in bed, completely safe. I touched my face, bone dry. My pillow, the sheets. Everything was dry. It had felt so real. The sensation of drowning was so vivid that my body was still in panic mode, adrenaline flooding my system. I got up, drank a glass of water from the bathroom sink, and tried to calm down. Stress, I told myself. Too much coffee. My mind playing tricks after a long day. I got back in bed, checked my phone, 10:47 p.m. I needed sleep. Conference started at 8 in the morning. I closed my eyes. Immediately, I was under again. Water everywhere, in my mouth, my lungs pulling me down. I tried to swim, but my limbs wouldn't cooperate. Something was holding my legs, dragging me deeper. The burning in my chest was unbearable. I was dying, drowning, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I threw myself out of bed, landing hard on the carpet, gasping and retching. This time, I turned on every light in the room. My hands were shaking. What the hell was happening? I didn't sleep the rest of that night. Every time I even started to drift off, the sensation returned. That horrifying feeling of water filling my lungs, of sinking into cold darkness. By 6 a.m., I was exhausted and terrified. I looked like hell, dark circles under my eyes, pale, shaky. At the conference, I ran into Blake, a colleague from our Phoenix office. We grabbed coffee during the first break. "You look terrible," he said bluntly. "Rough night. Weird insomnia." "Which room are you in?" 311. "Why?" His expression changed. "You're in 311 at the Grand Colonial." "Yeah, you know something about it?" Blake pulled out his phone and typed quickly, then showed me the screen. It was a travel forum post from 4 years ago. The title read, "Warning. Never stay in room 311 at Grand Colonial Hotel. I read it while Blake watched. The poster, someone named Tristan, described an experience almost identical to mine. Closing their eyes and immediately feeling like they were drowning, unable to sleep, checking out early. The post had dozens of responses, some skeptical, but several from people claiming similar experiences in that same room. It's famous in certain circles, Blake said quietly. I heard about it from Cody in our San Diego office. He says everyone local knows not to book that room. Hotels deny everything, of course. Bad for business. I spent my lunch break researching instead of eating. What I found made my blood run cold. The Grand Colonial had been renovated several times over its century-plus history. But room 311 had always been room 311, and people had been dying there since 1924. The first documented death was a woman named Lilith Morrison in 1924, found dead in the bathtub, drowned. The newspaper article called it a tragic accident. She'd apparently fallen asleep in the bath after an evening of drinking. Her husband Paolo claimed she didn't drink, that something else had happened, but the investigation went nowhere. In 1937, a businessman named Kenneth Alvarez drowned in the same bathtub. The room had been remodeled, but it was the same space. Accidental. Drowning, the report said. 1951. A newlywed named Ophelia Chen drowned in the bathtub on her honeymoon. 1968. Jorge Martinez, a college student visiting for the weekend, drowned. The pattern continued. 1979, 1983, 1992, 2001, 2009, 2015. Every few years, someone died in room 311, always drowning, always in the bathtub. And here's what made it truly insane. After the 1990s renovation, room 311 didn't even have a bathtub anymore, just a shower stall. But people still drowned. In 2009, a woman named Elena Vasquez was found dead in room 311. The autopsy confirmed drowning. Her lungs were full of water. But there was no bathtub, no standing water anywhere in the room. She'd somehow drowned in a room with only a shower, and nobody could explain it. The hotel had fought to keep it quiet, settling with families, paying off investigations. But the internet doesn't forget. Once I knew what to search for, I found dozens of accounts. Most people experienced what I had, the sensation of drowning when trying to sleep, the inability to rest, checking out early. But some didn't wake up. Some drowned while lying in a dry bed, water filling their lungs from nowhere. I went back to the hotel immediately, demanded to speak with the manager. Reed met me in his office, and I saw the resignation in his eyes before I even started talking. "You're in 311, he said. It wasn't a question. Why the hell would you put anyone in that room? People have died. The room is always available, he said quietly. We don't advertise it, but we can't just keep it empty forever. Corporate won't allow it. They say the deaths are coincidental, that every old hotel has a history. Coincidental. 12 people have drowned in a room that doesn't have a bathtub anymore." Reed looked tired, old. "I've worked here 31 years. I've seen things I can't explain. I tried to get the room permanently closed. I've begged corporate. They won't do it. So we do what we can. We never put families with children in 311. Never put anyone there if other rooms are available. But during conferences, when we're fully booked," he spread his hands helplessly. "Move me. Now. We're completely full. The medical conference has every room booked. I can try to find you something at a nearby hotel. Do it." He made calls while I sat there, shaking with exhaustion and anger. Every hotel in La Jolla was booked. It was peak tourist season, plus our conference. The nearest available room was in downtown San Diego, 40 minutes away. I took it. I didn't care. I threw my things in my suitcase and got out of the Grand Colonial as fast as I could. But before I left, I did something that still haunts me. I went back to room 311, stood in the doorway. I wouldn't go inside, and just looked at it. The beautiful room with its ocean view and antique furniture. In daylight, it looked harmless. Inviting even. That's when I saw her. A woman sitting on the edge of the bed. She wore a white nightgown. her dark hair hanging wet around her shoulders. Water dripped from her hair onto the carpet, forming a spreading puddle. She was looking down at her hands, turning them over slowly like she didn't recognize them. I blinked, and she was gone. The bed was empty. The carpet was dry. But I'd seen her. Just for a second, I'd seen Lilith Morrison or Ophelia Chen or Elena Vasquez or any of the women who drowned in that room over the past 93 years. I ran, got in my car, and drove to my new hotel in downtown San Diego. I didn't go back to the conference. I called in sick, which wasn't really a lie. I was sick. Sick with terror and exhaustion and the lingering sensation of water in my lungs. That night, in a completely different hotel, I finally slept. No drowning, no water. Just normal, dreamless sleep. But I couldn't let it go. Over the following months, I became obsessed with Room 311. I collected every article, every forum post, every documented death. I created a timeline. And I found something that the hotel and the police had missed. The bathtub. The original bathtub from 1924 where Lilith Morrison had died. It had been removed during renovations in 1996. I tracked it down through antique dealers and restoration records. A collector named Sawyer had purchased it, restored it, and sold it to a bed and breakfast in Oregon in 2003. I called them, asked about the tub. The owner, a woman named Juliana, was quiet for a long moment. "How did you know?" she asked finally. "Know what?" "We had to get rid of it. 5 years ago. Guests kept complaining about drowning sensations. 2 people nearly died. We found them unconscious in dry rooms, water in their lungs. We buried the tub. Literally buried it in the woods behind the property. Covered it in concrete and dirt. The tub was the source. Even removed from Room 311, it carried whatever curse or entity or trauma had begun in 1924. And Room 311 itself had become so saturated with death that it no longer needed the physical object. The space itself was poisoned. I tried to warn people, posted on travel sites, left reviews. But the Grand Colonial has lawyers, and my posts get taken down. The hotel is still operating. Room 311 is still being rented out. And every few years, someone doesn't wake up. Last month, I got a message from someone named Aspen who'd stayed in 311. They described the drowning sensation, the terror, the sleepless night. They got out alive, but barely. They wanted to know if I knew anything. I told them everything, and I gave them the same advice I'm giving anyone who reads this. If you ever book a room at the Grand Colonial Hotel in La Jolla and they try to put you in Room 311, refuse. Demand a different room. Leave if you have to. Because that room has been drowning people for 100 years, and it's not going to stop. Whatever lives in those walls, whatever echo of Lilith Morrison's death has soaked into the foundation, it's hungry. And it's patient. I still have nightmares. Even in different hotels, different cities, sometimes I close my eyes and I'm back underwater, sinking into cold darkness, my lungs burning. Those nights, I don't sleep at all. I just wait for morning. And I remember that I'm one of the lucky ones. I got out of Room 311 alive. Not everyone does. What would you do if you were diving in the deadliest underwater cave in the world and saw your own dead body floating in the darkness, wearing the same wetsuit you have on? In 2018, a routine technical dive in Egypt's Blue Hole became a descent into impossible horror. My name is Cruz, and I've been a technical diver for 12 years. I'm not some weekend warrior who does resort dives in shallow reefs. I'm talking deep diving, 200 feet, 300 feet, places where the water pressure can kill you in seconds if something goes wrong, where nitrogen narcosis turns your brain into mush and makes you do stupid things that get you killed. I've dived wrecks in the Baltic Sea, explored flooded cave systems in Mexico, gone deeper than most people will ever go. I respect the ocean, but I'm not afraid of it. Or I wasn't, until the Blue Hole. The Blue Hole in Dahab, Egypt, is famous for 2 things. It's stunningly beautiful, and it kills people. A lot of people. They call it the diver's cemetery for a reason. Over 200 divers have died there, most of them trying to swim through the arch, a tunnel that connects the blue hole to the open sea at about 180 feet down. It doesn't sound that dangerous on paper, but the arch is a killer. Divers get disoriented, run out of air, or get hit by nitrogen narcosis and make fatal decisions. I went there in April 2018 with my dive partner Cade. We'd been planning this trip for 2 years, proper technical diving with trimix gases, redundant equipment, conservative dive plans. We weren't cowboys. We knew exactly what we were doing. Or so I thought. The blue hole sits right on the coast, a circular sinkhole about 100 meters across, dropping straight down to over 100 meters deep. The water is this impossibly clear blue that shifts to deep indigo as you descend. Coral formations cling to the walls, and when you look up from depth, the surface is a perfect circle of light above you. We did 2 shallow dives the first day, getting familiar with the site. The second day, we planned our deep dive, down to 200 feet to see the arch from below, but not attempting to swim through it. Even experienced technical divers treat the arch with respect. We entered the water at 9 a.m. The conditions were perfect. No current, visibility over 100 feet, calm surface. We descended slowly down the wall, equalizing our ears every few feet. At 60 feet, the water temperature dropped noticeably. At 100 feet, the blue above us looked impossibly distant. At 150 feet, I could feel the narcosis starting to creep in, that underwater drunk feeling that makes everything seem dreamy and distant. Cade gave me the OK signal. I returned it. We continued down. At 180 feet, we reached the depth where the arch opens up. It's this massive tunnel carved through the reef wall, big enough to swim a truck through. We could see the faint glow of open water on the other side, maybe 80 feet away through the tunnel. The walls were covered in soft coral, and there was something peaceful about it, something that made you want to just swim through to the other side. That's when my dive computer started acting up. The depth reading flickered, showing 180 feet, then 240, then 310, then back to 180. The numbers scrolled impossibly fast. I tapped it, thinking it was malfunctioning. Cade looked at his. Same thing. Our computers were going haywire. Then I saw my flashlight beam catch something in the arch, something large, floating in the darkness of the tunnel. I pointed it out to Cade. We swam closer, staying at 180 feet, not entering the arch itself. It was a body. A diver, floating motionless in the tunnel, suspended in the current. Their gear looked new, their wetsuit intact. Sometimes divers who die in the arch stay there, preserved by the cold water and lack of scavengers at that depth. It's grim, but not shocking if you know the history of this place. But as we got closer, my blood went cold. The diver was wearing the exact same wetsuit as me. Same brand, same color pattern, black with blue side panels. Same configuration of equipment, same fins. I looked down at myself, then back at the floating body. Identical. Cade grabbed my arm, pointing at the body. Even through his mask, I could see his eyes were wide with panic. He pointed at the body, then at himself. I looked closer. There were 2 bodies in the arch. One wearing my gear, one wearing Cade's gear. Both of us dead, floating in the tunnel we hadn't even entered yet. Nitrogen narcosis can cause hallucinations. At 180 feet, your brain isn't working right. I knew this, but Cade was seeing it too. We were both looking at our own corpses. I checked my air supply, still good, plenty of gas for the ascent. I checked Cade's gauges, also good. We needed to leave, now. I gave the signal to ascend. That's when the bodies moved, not floating with the current, not drifting. They turned to face us, both of them simultaneously rotating in the water until their masks pointed directly at us. I couldn't see the faces behind the masks, just dark glass reflecting our flashlight beams. Then they started swimming toward us. I don't remember making the decision to bolt. Survival instinct took over. Cade and I kicked hard, swimming up the wall away from the arch. But you can't ascend quickly from 180 feet. The pressure change will give you decompression sickness, bend you, kill you. We had to control our ascent rate, even as those things came after us. I looked back. They were following, swimming with perfect form, closing the distance. My computer was still malfunctioning, numbers spinning wildly. I focused on Cade's computer, using it to monitor our ascent. 170 feet, 160 feet, too fast. We were ascending too fast, but slowing down meant those things would catch us. At 140 feet, one of them grabbed my fin. I felt the grip, cold and strong. I kicked frantically, and my fin came loose, left behind in its hand. I kept swimming with one fin, awkward and lopsided. Cade was ahead of me, looking back, his eyes wild behind his mask. 120 feet. The narcosis was clearing. My head felt clearer, which somehow made everything worse. This wasn't a hallucination. Something was chasing us up from the deep. At 100 feet, we hit our first decompression stop. We had no choice. We had to pause here for 3 minutes or risk the bends. I grabbed onto the anchor line that marked the spot, holding position. Cade did the same. We looked down. They were still there, both figures, hovering just below us at maybe 120 feet, watching, waiting. I could see my missing fin in the hand of the one that looked like me. The 3 minutes felt like 3 hours. I watched the timer on Cade's computer count down. The figures below didn't move, just hovered there like patient predators. My mind raced through possibilities. Nitrogen narcosis hallucination. But we were too shallow now. Some kind of elaborate prank. But that was impossible at this depth. Mass hallucination, shared delusion, anything but what my gut was telling me. That we'd seen ourselves dead in that arch, because that's what was supposed to happen. And something down here wanted to make sure it did. Timer hit 0. We continued up, 80 feet, 60 feet. Another decompression stop at 50 feet. When we looked down, the figures were still there, still following, always staying just below us in the darker water. At 20 feet, doing our final safety stop, I saw them clearly for the first time. The sunlight penetrated enough at this depth to see without flashlights. The diver wearing my gear looked exactly like me. Same build, same everything. But behind the mask, where the face should be, there was nothing. Just darkness. Empty. Like a shell, a hollow copy. We surfaced after what felt like hours, but was actually 40 minutes. The moment my head broke the water, I ripped out my regulator and screamed for the boat. The support crew hauled us out, confused by our panic. We were supposed to be experienced, professional. But we scrambled onto that boat like drowning rats. I never looked back at the water. I didn't want to see if those things surfaced behind us. Back on shore, we packed our gear in silence. Other divers asked if we'd made the arch. We didn't answer. What could we say? That we'd seen our own corpses. That something wearing our faces had chased us up from the deep. They'd think we had narcosis-induced psychosis. They'd say we shouldn't be diving. But that night, I did what I should have done before we ever entered that water. I researched every death in the blue hole that I could find documentation for. Newspaper articles, dive accident reports, forum posts from witnesses. In 2003, a diver named Hendricks died in the arch. His buddy survived. In his statement, the buddy mentioned something strange. Right before Hendricks entered the arch, he said he saw someone ahead of him in the tunnel. He was swimming toward what he thought was another diver. But there was no one else at that depth. The buddy tried to stop him, but Hendricks kept swimming into the arch, following something only he could see. They found his body 3 days later. In 2009, 2 divers named Emerson and Bodie died together in the arch. A technical diving instructor was at 100 feet doing a class when he saw them descend past him, heading for the arch. He said they were swimming strangely, mechanically, following 2 figures ahead of them that he couldn't quite make out in the deep water. Both died. double fatality. In 2015, a diver named Cash survived the arch, but left diving forever. I found a forum post from him, years old, where he described seeing copies of himself in the tunnel. People told him it was narcosis. He never dived again. The pattern was there. Divers seeing themselves, seeing others, being lured into the arch by something that wore familiar faces. And everyone who followed those figures died in that tunnel. Kate and I were lucky. We saw them before we entered the arch. We ran instead of following. But what haunts me is this. Our bodies were already there. We saw ourselves dead in that tunnel. So what does that mean? Are we living on borrowed time? Did we somehow break a pattern that was supposed to end with us drowned at 180 feet? I shipped all my diving gear to my brother Steven in Colorado. Told him to sell it, donate it. I don't care. I'll never use it again. Cade moved to Arizona, as far from the ocean as he could get. We don't talk about what happened. What's there to say? But sometimes, late at night, I think about those bodies in the arch. My body. Cade's body. Were they future versions of us, somehow displaced in time? Were they warnings? Or were they something else entirely? Copies made by whatever lives in that dark water, waiting for the right moment to replace us. Last month, I got a message from a diver I don't know, someone named Zaire. They'd heard I'd dived the blue hole. They were planning a trip, wanted advice. I told them not to go. Told them the blue hole has claimed enough lives. They thanked me but said they were experienced. They'd be careful. I checked the diving accident reports last week. Zaire died in the blue hole on October 2nd, 2024, drowned in the arch. The report mentioned something strange. Another diver saw Zaire swimming into the tunnel following someone, but there was no one else at that depth that day. The blue hole is still there, still beautiful, still killing, and something in that arch is still waiting, still wearing the faces of the drowned, still luring divers into the dark. I survived. But I left something down there in those depths. My courage, my love of diving, my certainty that I understood the ocean. Now I know better. There are places in this world where the rules don't apply, places where the dead don't stay dead and the water remembers every life it's taken. The blue hole is one of those places, and if you ever find yourself there, floating at 180 feet, looking into that tunnel, and you see someone familiar swimming ahead of you in the dark, don't follow them. Turn around, ascend, get out, because that's not a person you're seeing. It's bait, and the arch is hungry. Imagine if you explored an abandoned radio station with no electricity, found it was still broadcasting, and when you spoke into the dead microphone, your own voice answered back asking where you are. In 2016, an urban exploration trip to West Virginia became a nightmare when something on the other end of the transmission started hunting. I've always been drawn to abandoned places. There's something beautiful about decay, about nature reclaiming what humans left behind. I'm a photographer, mostly freelance work, some gallery shows, but my real passion is urbex photography. Abandoned hospitals, forgotten amusement parks, dead shopping malls. I document the spaces people have walked away from. My name is Caleb, and I thought I'd seen everything until I found station WVKM. It started with a road trip through Appalachia in November 2016. I was driving back roads in West Virginia, looking for interesting locations, when I picked up a strange radio signal. Just static mostly, but underneath it I could hear something. Music, maybe, or voices too distorted to make out. The frequency was 98.3 FM, not listed on any station guide. I followed the signal strength, getting stronger as I drove deeper into the mountains. That's how I found it. A narrow gravel road leading up a hillside, overgrown with kudzu and autumn bear trees. At the end sat a 2-story brick building with a rusted transmission tower rising from its roof. Faded letters on the side, WVKM 98.3. The voice of the mountains. The windows were dark. The parking lot was cracked and weedy. The place had obviously been abandoned for decades, but my car radio was still picking up that signal stronger than ever. Static, and beneath it, something that sounded almost like breathing. I parked and grabbed my camera gear. The front door was chained, but the chain had rusted through. I pulled it aside and pushed the door open. The hinges screamed. Inside was a reception area thick with dust and dead leaves that had blown in through broken windows. Old furniture, rotted and moldy. A reception desk with a sign-in sheet from 1978, the last date anyone had signed in. The station had been abandoned for 38 years. I moved through the ground floor, photographing everything. A break room with a vintage coffee maker still on the counter. The coffee inside turned to black sludge. Office spaces with papers scattered across desks, calendars frozen on August 1978. It was like everyone had just walked out one day and never came back. The broadcast booth was on the second floor. I climbed the stairwell, each step creaking under my weight. The door to the booth was closed. I could hear something from inside, a faint humming, electrical in nature. I opened the door. The broadcast equipment was still there. Mixing board, microphones, vinyl record players, all the technology of 1970s radio. Everything was covered in dust and cobwebs, but the equipment was on. Lights glowed on the mixing board. VU meters bounced, as if picking up sound. The sight was impossible. The building had no power. I'd seen the dead transformer on the way in, the cut power lines. But the equipment was active, broadcasting. I approached the main microphone, an old RCA 77DX, the kind you see in vintage photos. The on-AR sign above it glowed red. I pulled out my phone to take photos and noticed something strange. My phone showed no signal, not unusual this deep in the mountains, but the time display was wrong. It showed 3:47 a.m. My watch showed 2:15 p.m. I restarted my phone. Same thing, 3:47 a.m. The VU meters suddenly spiked, needles slamming into the red zone. From the monitors came a burst of static so loud I covered my ears. Then a voice, distorted and layered, speaking through the static. "Can you hear me? If you can hear this, something wrong. Don't come to the station. It's still here." The voice cut off. Silence. Then just the low static again. My hands were shaking as I set up my camera. This was incredible. Disturbing, but incredible. I had to document this. I started taking photos. The glowing equipment, the vintage microphones, the dust-covered vinyl records still stacked by the turntables. That's when I made my mistake. I don't know why I did it. Curiosity, stupidity, the same impulse that makes people pick up phones that ring in horror movies. I leaned toward the microphone and spoke. "Hello? Is someone here?" My voice came out of the monitors, compressed and processed like a real broadcast. But then, a few seconds later, my voice came through again. The exact same words, same inflection, but I hadn't spoken twice. "Hello? Is someone here?" It was my voice, but not from me, coming from the broadcast itself, playing back what I'd just said. I stepped away from the microphone. The VU meters were moving, showing active sound, but I wasn't making any noise. Something was being transmitted. I turned up the monitor volume to hear it better. Breathing. Heavy, labored breathing. Then my voice again, but saying words I'd never spoken. "Where are you, Caleb?" Ice flooded my veins. I'd never said my name. Not out loud, not into that microphone. But something knew it. Something was using my voice to speak. I asked where you are, Caleb. The voice was coming from the monitors, but also from somewhere else, deeper in the building. Downstairs, maybe, or in the walls, echoing through the empty station. I grabbed my camera bag and turned to leave. The broadcast booth door slammed shut. I ran to it, grabbed the handle, locked. I pulled hard, threw my shoulder against it. The door wouldn't budge. From the monitors behind me, my voice spoke again. "Don't leave yet. We've been waiting for someone to visit. It's been so long since anyone came to the station." I spun around. The microphone was swaying slightly, like someone had just stepped away from it. The on-AR light pulsed brighter, dimmer, brighter. "Who are you?" I shouted. "What do you want?" The VU meters danced as my words were picked up. Then, from the monitors, a response in my voice, but with an inflection I'd never use, almost mocking. "Who are you? What do you want?" It was mimicking me, learning my speech patterns. Through the monitors, I heard footsteps, not in the booth, but somewhere in the building. Heavy footsteps climbing stairs, coming toward the second floor, coming toward me. I looked around frantically for another way out. The windows were high and narrow, too small to climb through. The only exit was the door, and it wasn't opening. The footsteps grew louder, closer. They were in the hallway now, just outside the booth. The door handle started to turn. I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed a microphone stand, solid metal, heavy, and held it like a baseball bat. The door swung open slowly, creaking on old hinges. Nothing there. The hallway was empty. But the footsteps continued, now inside the booth with me. I could hear them on the floor, walking in a circle around the broadcast equipment. Around me. But there was nothing to see. Just air and dust and the sound of something invisible moving through the space. My voice came from the monitors again, but wrong this time. Distorted, layered with static and something underneath that wasn't human. "You shouldn't have come here, Caleb. Nobody comes to the station anymore. Not since 1978. Not since we became part of the broadcast." The footsteps stopped right in front of me. I felt cold air, breath on my face, smelled something awful, decay and ozone and burnt electronics. Then I felt hands on my shoulders, cold, grip tight. I couldn't see anything, but something was touching me, holding me in place. The microphone in front of me activated on its own, the sound level jumping, and through the monitors, I heard my voice speaking words I wasn't saying. "This is station WVKM, 98.3 FM, the voice of the mountains. My name is Caleb, and I'm here to stay, broadcasting forever. Just like Atticus and Miriam and Noah and all the others who came before. We're all here now, all part of the signal." The grip on my shoulders tightened. I was being pulled toward the microphone, forced closer. The on-air light blazed bright red. I realized what was happening. It wanted me to speak into that microphone, to say my name, to identify myself on the broadcast. And if I did, I'd become part of whatever this thing was, trapped in the signal like the others it had mentioned. I swung the microphone stand with everything I had. It passed through the invisible thing holding me. No resistance, like swinging through smoke. But the impact shattered one of the monitor speakers. The sound was deafening. The grip released. I stumbled backward, and in that moment of freedom, I ran. I hit the booth door at full speed, and this time it gave way. I crashed into the hallway, rolled, got to my feet, and ran for the stairs. Behind me, from the broadcast booth, I heard the equipment going crazy, all the monitors screaming, feedback, the sound distorting into something that wasn't static or music, but voices. Dozens of voices, maybe hundreds, all talking over each other, all begging for help, or warning me to run, or just screaming endlessly. I took the stairs 3 at a time, hit the ground floor, sprinted for the exit. My camera bag swung and banged against my back. I could hear footsteps behind me, not invisible this time, but multiple sets, dozens of feet pounding down the stairs in pursuit. I burst through the front door into the November afternoon. The sunlight felt like salvation. I ran to my car, threw my gear in the back, started the engine. In my rearview mirror, I saw them. Figures in the doorway of the station, translucent, flickering like bad television reception. They stood there, watching as I threw the car in reverse and fishtailed down the gravel road. I didn't stop driving until I was 2 states away. That night, in a motel in Kentucky, I tried to review the photos on my camera. Every single image from the broadcast booth was corrupted. Just static and distortion. Except one. The last photo I'd taken, a shot of the main broadcast desk. And in that photo, I could see them. Dozens of people crowded into that small booth, translucent and wrong, all of them staring at the camera. at me. Their mouths open like they were screaming, but no sound could escape. I never went back to West Virginia. I sold my Urbex photography equipment. Some places aren't abandoned. They're occupied by something worse than emptiness. But here's what keeps me awake at night. Sometimes when I'm driving alone and scanning through radio stations, I pick up that signal. 98.3 FM, static, and underneath it, voices. And sometimes, buried in all that noise, I hear my own voice saying things I never said. This is station WVKM. This is Caleb. I'm still here, broadcasting forever. It got part of me. I don't know how much. Maybe just my voice, an echo I left behind in that booth. Or maybe something more. Sometimes I lose time, minutes, hours. I'll be doing something normal and then realize I've been standing still staring at nothing while time slipped past. Last month, my friend Leah called me. She's a photographer too, does similar work. She said she'd found an amazing location, an abandoned radio station in West Virginia. Asked if I wanted to come along, said the photos would be incredible. I told her no, told her to stay away from it. But she went anyway. That was 3 weeks ago. She hasn't answered her phone since. And 2 days ago, I was scanning radio stations and I heard her voice. This is station WVKM, 98.3 FM. My name is Leah, and I'm here now, broadcasting forever. The station is still there, still broadcasting, still waiting for someone to step inside and speak into that microphone. And everyone who does becomes part of the signal, trapped in an endless transmission that's been going since 1978. I should warn people. I should tell someone official, get that place burned, down, or demolished. But who would believe me? And I'm terrified that if I draw attention to it, if I tell the story too loudly, it'll pull me back. That my voice, the part of me that's already trapped in that signal, will become a beacon calling me home. So I stay quiet. I stay away from West Virginia. And I never, ever listen to 98.3 FM. But the station is still broadcasting, still waiting. And if you're ever driving through Appalachia and you pick up a strange signal on 92.833, voices under the static, someone calling for help, keep driving. Don't go looking for the source. Don't speak into the microphone, because the voice of the mountains is always listening. And it's always hungry for new voices to add to the broadcast. Have you ever picked up a hitchhiker who knew exactly how you were going to die, described your final moments in perfect detail, then vanished from your backseat while you were still driving? A midnight run through New Mexico in 2023 taught me that some roads remember every life they've taken, and they're always hungry for more. My name is Tobias, and I drive trucks for a living. 18-wheelers, coast to coast, whatever needs hauling. I've been doing this for 16 years, logged over 2 million miles on American highways. I've driven through blizzards in Wyoming, dust storms in Texas, and fog so thick in Oregon I couldn't see my own hood. I've seen weird things on the road, strange lights, animals that don't quite look right, stretches of highway that feel wrong for reasons I can't explain. But I'd never been truly scared. Not until Route 491. Most people don't know that Route 491 used to be called Highway 666. They renamed it in 2003 because of the reputation. The Devil's Highway, they called it. Highest fatality rate of any highway in the country. Accidents, disappearances, things that couldn't be explained. The government blamed it on poor road conditions and drunk drivers, but locals knew better. They renamed the highway thinking it would help. It didn't. The road doesn't care what number you paint on the signs. I was hauling auto parts from Albuquerque to Cortez, Colorado in August 2020. The route took me north on 491, straight through the high desert of New Mexico and into the Four Corners region. It's desolate country, miles between towns, nothing but scrub brush and red rock formations under a sky so big it makes you feel small. I'd driven it dozens of times before without incident. I left Albuquerque at 8 p.m., planning to drive through the night and deliver by morning. The truck was loaded, diesel tanks full, thermos of coffee in the cup holder. My CB radio crackled with occasional chatter from other truckers, but as I got further from the city, the voices faded. By midnight, I was alone on 491, just me and the empty road stretching into darkness. That's when I saw him. A figure standing on the shoulder, thumb out, the universal sign for needing a ride. I almost drove past. You're not supposed to pick up hitchhikers in a commercial vehicle company policy, but something made me slow down. Maybe it was the complete isolation of the place, the knowledge that the next town was 40 miles away. Maybe it was just instinct. Whatever the reason, I pulled over. He walked up to the passenger side, and I got my first good look at him in the glow of my running lights. Late 20s maybe, wearing jeans and a faded denim jacket. Dark hair, ordinary face, nothing memorable about him. He carried no backpack, no water bottle, nothing, just standing in the middle of nowhere at midnight. I rolled down the passenger window. "Where you headed?" "North," he said. His voice was flat, emotionless. "Wherever you're going." Red flag, but I was already committed. I unlocked the door. "Hop in. I'm going to Cortez." He climbed into the cab without a word, shut the door, and sat staring straight ahead through the windshield. I pulled back onto the highway, checked my mirrors, got up to speed. The CB radio hissed with static. "Name's Tobias," I said, trying to be friendly. "What's yours?" He didn't answer right away. We drove in silence for maybe 5 miles before he finally spoke. "You're going to die tonight." I laughed nervously. "What?" "You're going to die tonight, Tobias. On this highway. Mile marker 37, that's where it happens." My hands tightened on the wheel. "That's not funny, man." He turned to look at me for the first time. His eyes were completely black. Not brown, not dark. Black. No visible iris or pupil, just solid black from edge to edge. "I'm not joking. Mile marker 37. Your truck will veer off the road. You'll overcorrect, lose control. The trailer will jackknife. You'll roll 3 times before coming to rest upside down in the ravine. The diesel tanks will rupture. Fire. You'll be conscious for 43 seconds while you burn." Ice flooded through my veins. "Get out. Get out of my truck right now." "You're at mile marker 18, he continued as if I hadn't spoken. 19 miles to go. Would you like to know what your last thoughts will be? You'll think about your daughter, Emerson. You'll regret missing her 10th birthday next month because of this run. That regret will be the last thing you feel before the pain becomes everything." I'd never mentioned my daughter. Her name wasn't on any paperwork in the cab. There was no way this stranger could know about her birthday, about any of it. I looked over at the passenger seat. It was empty. He was gone, just vanished, but I could still smell him. Something chemical and wrong, like burning plastic. My CB radio burst to life with my own voice. Mile marker 37. 19 miles to go, 19 miles to go. I grabbed the radio handset. "Who is this? Who the hell is on this channel?" Static. Then my voice again, but with that same flat, emotionless tone the hitchhiker had used. "You can't outrun it, Tobias. The highway has already decided." I looked at the odometer, calculating. I was at mile marker 19 now. 18 miles to 37. My hands were shaking. This was impossible. Hallucination brought on by exhaustion, that had to be it. I'd been driving too long, needed sleep, but I couldn't stop. Not here, not on this cursed stretch of road. I pushed the accelerator, speeding up. If I could just get past mile marker 37, get beyond whatever was supposed to happen there, I'd be safe. The truck's engine roared as I pushed it to 70, 75, 80 miles per hour. Way too fast for a loaded 18-wheeler on a dark highway, but I didn't care. Mile marker 25, mile marker 28. I was closing in on it. The highway ahead was straight and empty. Nothing that could cause an accident. No curves, no obstacles. Whatever the hitchhiker had predicted wasn't going to happen. It couldn't happen. Mile marker 35. My heart was pounding. 2 miles to go. I gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles were white. Mile marker 36. That's when I saw them. Figures standing in the road. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, spread across both lanes. Men, women, children. All of them, translucent, glowing faintly in my headlights. All of them, staring at me with those same solid black eyes. I had maybe 3 seconds to react, swerve around them and risk losing control, brake hard and hope the load didn't shift and crush me, or drive straight through them because they weren't real, couldn't be real, were just exhaustion-induced hallucinations. I chose to swerve, yanked the wheel hard to the right. The truck responded sluggishly. Too much weight, too much momentum. I felt the trailer beginning to swing out behind me, the beginning of a jackknife. I overcorrected, steering left. The cab lurched. The whole rig started to tip. In that moment, as the world tilted and I knew I was going to roll, I understood. The hitchhiker hadn't predicted my death. He'd caused it. By telling me exactly what would happen, he'd made me paranoid, made me speed, made me react wrong when I saw those figures in the road. The prophecy was self-fulfilling. But here's the thing about prophecies. Sometimes you can break them if you're willing to do something unexpected. Instead of fighting the roll, I went with it. Cut the wheel sharply right, accelerated instead of braking. The truck tilted further, and for a horrible moment I thought I'd miscalculated. Then the trailer came back down with a bone-jarring crash. All 18 wheels back on pavement. The truck fishtailed wildly, but I controlled it, let it drift, gradually straightened out. I was through. Mile marker 37 was behind me. I was shaking, covered in sweat, but alive. The CB radio crackled. Mile marker 37, not my voice this time. Different voices, overlapping, dozens of them. Mile marker 52, mile marker 71, mile marker 89. They were listing locations, death sites, every fatal accident on this highway going back decades. The voices kept coming, hundreds of them now, an endless litany of mile markers where people had died on the Devil's Highway. And then I understood the full horror. The hitchhiker wasn't trying to kill me specifically. It was the road itself, the accumulated death and suffering of Highway 666, given form. It appeared to drivers, told them how they'd die, and their fear and attempts to avoid that death made the prediction come true. Every accident, every fatality fed the curse, made it stronger. I'd broken the pattern. I'd survived mile marker 37, and the highway was angry about it. My truck started to shake. Not mechanical failure. I knew my rig inside and out, and this wasn't engine trouble. The entire truck was vibrating like something was trying to tear it apart from the outside. The CB radio shrieked with feedback and voices screaming. My headlights flickered, dimmed, cut out completely. I was driving blind on a dark highway at 80 miles per hour with no lights and something trying to shake my truck into pieces. I did the only thing I could think of. I started talking to my daughter, out loud like she could hear me. "Hey, Emmy, it's Dad. I'm going to make it to your birthday party, I promise. I'm going to bring you that bike you wanted, the purple one with the streamers on the handles. We'll go riding in the park like we used to before I started doing these long hauls. I'm going to be there, baby. I'm not going to let this road take me." The shaking intensified. The windshield cracked in a spiderweb pattern. But I kept talking, kept thinking about Emerson, about getting home, about breaking this curse through sheer, stubborn refusal to die. My headlights flickered back on. The road ahead was clear. No figures, no hitchhiker, just empty highway stretching north. The shaking stopped. The voices on the CB faded to static, then silence. I crossed into Colorado 30 minutes later. The moment I passed the state line, everything felt normal again, like waking from a nightmare. I pulled into the first truck stop I found and sat in the parking lot for an hour, just shaking and crying, and grateful to be alive. I delivered my load the next morning, then called my dispatcher and told him I quit. No explanation, no notice. I was done with long-haul trucking, done with lonely highways and midnight runs through places where the dead don't rest. I made it to Emerson's birthday party, brought her that purple bike. We went riding in the park, and I held her tight and didn't tell her how close she'd come to losing her father on a cursed highway in New Mexico. But sometimes, late at night, I think about all those voices on the CB, all those mile markers, all those people who didn't survive their encounter with the hitchhiker. And I wonder if the next person who drives Highway 491 at midnight will be as lucky as I was. I wonder if they'll see him standing on the shoulder with his thumb out. And if they do, I hope they keep driving, because the Devil's Highway is always hungry, and it's very, very patient. Picture yourself sneaking into America's most haunted asylum after dark, hearing footsteps and clipboard pages flipping, only to realize the building thinks it's still operational, and you're the new patient who needs to be admitted permanently. What happened to me at Pennhurst State School in Pennsylvania during October 2019 will make you understand why some buildings should never be entered, no matter how curious you are. They call it urban exploration, but really it's trespassing with a camera. I'm Angelo, 26 years old, and I've made a decent living posting videos of abandoned places on YouTube. Hospitals, prisons, amusement parks, anywhere with history and decay, I'll explore it. My channel had just hit 500,000 subscribers, and I needed something big for my next video, something that would take me to 1 million. That's why I chose Pennhurst. Pennhurst State School and Hospital in Spring City, Pennsylvania, is legendary in the urbex community. Opened in 1908 as an institution for people with intellectual disabilities, it became infamous for abuse, neglect, and inhumane conditions. By the time it closed in 1987, thousands had suffered within its walls. Thousands had died there too. Now it sits abandoned. Well, partially. They do Halloween tours, but the really interesting buildings are off limits, chained up, dangerous. That's where I wanted to go. I drove up from Baltimore in mid-October 2019. The facility sprawls across 110 acres, dozens of buildings connected by underground tunnels, each one more decrepit than the last. I'd done my research, knew which buildings were most accessible, which had the best visuals for video content. I was targeting the Mayflower building, one of the main dormitories, completely abandoned, structurally unsound. Perfect. I arrived just after sunset. The property has security, but they can't patrol everywhere at once. I parked a mile away and hiked in through the woods, carrying my camera gear, flashlights, and a backpack with supplies. The October air was cold, and leaves crunched under my boots. Through the trees, I could see the silhouettes of the buildings against the darkening sky. Massive brick structures with broken windows, like something from a nightmare. The Mayflower building stood 4 stories tall, its facade crumbling, ivy consuming the walls. I found a ground floor window with the boards pried loose, probably by other explorers, and squeezed through. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating a day room. Institutional furniture lay scattered and broken. Mold covered the walls. The smell was overwhelming, decay and dampness, and something else, something chemical I couldn't identify. I started filming immediately, doing my standard intro. What's up, everyone? It's Angelo, and tonight we're inside Pennhurst State School, one of the most haunted locations in America. This is the Mayflower building, completely off limits, and we're going to explore every floor. Let's see what we can find. The ground floor was what I expected. Day rooms, offices, bathrooms with fixtures ripped out by scavengers. Graffiti covered every surface. Broken glass crunched underfoot. I documented everything, keeping up my commentary for the camera, trying to create that perfect blend of information and atmosphere that my subscribers loved. I found the stairwell and headed up. The second floor housed patient rooms, tiny cells with heavy doors, observation windows, restraint anchors still bolted to the walls. Some rooms had old medical equipment left behind, rusted and useless. I got great footage, my excitement building. This video was going to be incredible. The third floor was more of the same, but the decay was worse. The ceiling had partially collapsed in places, and I had to navigate carefully around holes in the floor. My flashlight flickered once, and I made a mental note to check the batteries. Can't have equipment failures in a place like this. That's when I heard it. From somewhere above me, on the 4th floor, came the sound of footsteps. Not the settling of an old building, not wind or animals. Footsteps. Distinct, rhythmic, moving across the floor directly above my head. I froze, camera still rolling. "Did you guys hear that?" I whispered. The footsteps continued, walking from one end of the building to the other, then stopping. Silence. Then another sound, pages turning, like someone flipping through a book or clipboard. My heart was racing, but I was also thrilled. Paranormal evidence, captured on camera. This would be huge for my channel. I headed for the stairs to the 4th floor, moving quietly, trying not to announce my presence. If there was something up there, ghost, squatter, whatever, I wanted to catch it on film. The 4th floor stairwell door was closed. I pushed it open slowly. It creaked on rusted hinges, the sound echoing through the empty building. Beyond was a long hallway, darker than the floors below, because more of the windows were boarded up. My flashlight beam barely penetrated the gloom. I stepped into the hallway and immediately noticed something wrong. The air felt different here, heavier, charged, like the moment before a thunderstorm. The temperature had dropped at least 10 degrees. My breath came out in visible puffs. The footsteps started again, but this time they were right in front of me. I pointed my camera and flashlight down the hallway. Nothing visible, but I could hear them clearly, shoes on linoleum walking toward me. The sound of keys jangling, more footsteps, multiple sets now coming from different directions. "Hello?" I called out. "Security? I'm just doing photography. I'll leave." No response. But the footsteps continued, surrounding me now. I could hear them from the rooms on either side, from behind me, from further down the hall. Dozens of footsteps, all converging on my position. Then came voices. Muffled at first, indistinct, but growing louder. Authoritative voices, giving orders. "Get the patient restrained. Prepare the sedative. Room 447 immediately." I spun around, camera capturing everything. The hallway was still empty, but the voices were clear now, like they were right next to me. I could hear the jangle of keys, the squeak of a medication cart being pushed, the shuffle of feet as multiple people moved with purpose. "This is incredible," I whispered to the camera, trying to maintain my composure, even though every instinct screamed at me to run. We're experiencing what sounds like residual haunting, echoes of the past when this place was operational. A door slammed behind me. I whirled around. Room 447. The door had just closed, but I'd seen it standing open a moment ago. Through the small window in the door, I saw a light. Not a flashlight, but the steady glow of overhead fluorescent lighting. That was impossible. The building had no power, but I could see it clearly. Institutional lighting coming from inside room 447. I approached the door slowly, camera pointed at the window. Inside, I could see a patient room, but it looked different from the abandoned ruins I'd been exploring. This room was intact, bed made with white sheets, medical equipment standing ready, walls clean and painted. And there were people inside. I could see figures in white uniforms, medical staff moving around a bed. I tried the door handle, locked. I knocked. "Hey, what's going on in there?" The figures inside didn't react. They continued their work, whatever it was, completely ignoring me. I watched through the window as they surrounded the bed, holding down someone I couldn't quite see. One of them prepared a syringe. Another adjusted leather restraints. Then one of the staff members looked up, directly at me. Her face was pale, eyes sunken but alert and focused. She didn't look surprised to see me. She looked expectant, like she'd been waiting. She walked to the door, and I heard the lock mechanism turn. The door swung open. The room beyond was not the clean, operational space I'd just seen through the window. It was abandoned, ruined, exactly like every other room in the building. No lights, no medical equipment, no staff, just an empty room with a rusty bed frame and peeling walls. But standing in the doorway was a woman in a nurse's uniform from the 1950s. She was translucent, flickering slightly like an old film projection, but solid enough that I could see every detail. Her white cap, her name tag reading Jane, the clipboard she held in her hands. Patient 1247, she said, her voice flat and mechanical. Angelo Reyes, age 26, admitted for evaluation and treatment. Come with me, please. She knew my name. My full name, which I never used on my channel. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping my camera. I'm not a patient. I'm just exploring. I'm leaving now. She tilted her head, consulting her clipboard. Attempting to deny admission. Common symptom of delusional disorder. Please come willingly, Angelo, or we'll be forced to restrain you. Other figures appeared in the hallway behind her. More nurses, orderlies in white uniforms, all of them translucent and flickering but moving with purpose. They spread out, blocking the hallway in both directions, trapping me. This facility is closed, I said, my voice shaking. You're not real. You're ghosts, echoes. You can't hurt me. Nurse Jane smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Pennhurst is never closed, Angelo. There are always patients who need treatment. The work never stops. We never stop. The figures started moving toward me. I ran, sprinted down the hallway toward the stairwell, my camera and equipment banging against my body. Behind me, I could hear them following, not running, just walking with that steady, inexorable pace of people who know their patient can't escape. I hit the stairwell door at full speed, crashed through, and took the stairs 3 at a time, going down. 4th floor to 3rd, 3rd to 2nd. I could hear them above me, coming down the stairs in perfect synchronization, their footsteps echoing in the concrete shaft. On the 2nd floor, I burst through the door and ran for the window I'd entered through. But the hallway had changed. It wasn't the abandoned ruin anymore. It was operational, lit by harsh fluorescent lights, walls painted institutional green, floor polished, rooms lined both sides. And through the windows, I could see patients. Real patients, or ghosts of patients, sitting on beds or standing at doors, all of them staring at me as I ran past. I found a window, not the one I'd entered through, but any window, and grabbed a chair to smash the glass. But when I swung it, the chair passed through the window like it wasn't there. Like I wasn't in the physical building anymore, but in some echo of its past, trapped in the Pennhurst that had existed decades ago. The staff caught up to me. Hands grabbed my arms, cold hands that felt solid despite being translucent. I fought, thrashed, screamed, but there were too many of them. They pulled me down, and I felt a sharp pain in my arm. One of them had injected me with something. Not a real injection. My arm wasn't actually punctured, but I felt the effects immediately. Numbness spreading from the injection site, my limbs growing heavy, my thoughts becoming sluggish. They dragged me to a room, room 213, placed me on a bed, strapped me down with leather restraints that felt real even though I knew they couldn't be. Nurse Jane stood over me, consulting her clipboard. Patient 1247 is secured and sedated. We'll begin evaluation in the morning. For now, rest. Pennhurst will take good care of you, Angelo, just like we've taken care of all our patients. The lights went out. I was alone in the darkness, strapped to a bed in an abandoned building that thought it was still operating. I tried to move, but the restraints held. I tried to call out, but my voice came out as a whisper. Whatever they'd injected me with, real or psychosomatic, was working. I don't know how long I lay there. Hours, maybe. I drifted in and out of consciousness, and every time I woke, I could hear sounds from the hallway. Staff making rounds, patients calling out, the everyday operations of an institution that had been closed for 30 years. My camera was still recording. It had fallen on the floor when they grabbed me, but the red light was on, battery still good. If I didn't make it out, at least there would be evidence of what happened here. Eventually, the effects of the phantom sedative began to wear off. I could move my fingers, then my hands. The restraints felt less solid, more like the memory of restraints than physical objects. I pulled against them, and slowly, gradually, they gave way. I rolled off the bed and grabbed my camera. The room was dark and abandoned again, back to ruins. The door stood open. I stumbled into the hallway, also abandoned, no lights, no staff. The building had released me, at least temporarily. I ran, found the stairwell, went down to the ground floor, navigated by flashlight to the nearest window. This time, when I broke the glass with my flashlight, it shattered properly. I climbed through, cutting my hands on the broken glass, not caring. I ran across the grounds, through the woods, didn't stop until I reached my car a mile away. I sat in the driver's seat, shaking and bleeding, trying to process what had happened. Had it been real? Some kind of mass hallucination? Toxic mold in the building causing delusions? But my camera had recorded something. I could see the red light indicating a saved file. I drove to a motel, locked myself in the room, and reviewed the footage. It was all there. The footsteps, the voices, Nurse Jane, the staff, me being restrained. All of it captured on camera. Proof that Penhurst wasn't just haunted by passive ghosts, but by something active. Something that still believed it was operational and could make visitors believe it too. I never posted that video. Never went back to urban exploration. The experience broke something in me. Made me understand that some places aren't just haunted. They're traps. Penhurst was an institution designed to hold people against their will. And even in abandonment, even in death, it still fulfilled that function. 6 months later, I heard about another explorer who went into the Mayflower building. A guy named Phoenix, who ran an urbex channel similar to mine. He went in at night, alone, trying to film the 4th floor. They found his camera 3 days later. The footage showed him being admitted as a patient, restrained, sedated. But they never found Phoenix himself. He's still listed as missing. Still somewhere in those buildings, I think. Still a patient at an asylum that refuses to close. I live in California now, as far from Pennsylvania as I could get. I work a normal job, live a normal life. But sometimes, late at night, I hear footsteps in my apartment. The sound of keys jangling, pages turning on a clipboard. And I know that Penhurst hasn't forgotten me, that Nurse Jane still has my file, still considers me patient 1047, who escaped before treatment was complete. And I know that one day they might come to finish what they started, because Penhurst never releases its patients. Not really. Not ever. Working on a cruise ship means you see the same faces for months. Passengers come and go, but the crew becomes family. So when I started seeing passengers in crew-only areas wearing clothes from decades past, asking about activities that hadn't been offered in years, I knew something was terribly wrong on the Carnival Paradise. My name is Cody, and I've worked cruise ships for 8 years. Started as a bartender, worked my way up to assistant cruise director. It's a good life if you can handle being at sea for months at a time. You see the world, meet interesting people, and the pay isn't bad. The Carnival Paradise is a mid-sized ship, about 2,000 passengers, routes through the Caribbean. I know every deck, every corridor, every restricted area, or I thought I did. It started in March 2021, just as cruises were resuming after the COVID shutdown. We were doing a 7-day Caribbean loop, Miami to Cozumel, to Grand Cayman to Jamaica and back. The ship was at half capacity due to health restrictions, so there was plenty of space. Quiet voyage, mostly families, and older couples happy to be traveling again after a year of lockdown. 3rd day out, I was doing my morning walkthrough of the crew areas, checking that everything was stocked, that housekeeping was on schedule, that the entertainment staff had what they needed for the day's activities. I was in Deck 2, the crew mess hall, grabbing coffee before the morning meeting. That's when I saw her. A woman in her 50s, wearing a bright floral dress and carrying a beach bag. She was standing at the crew coffee station, looking confused, turning in circles like she was lost. "Ma'am." I approached her with my professional smile. "This is a crew-only area. Passenger decks are above us. I can show you how to get back." She looked at me with genuine confusion. "I'm looking for the Lido deck. The activities director said there's a pineapple carving demonstration at 10 o'clock. "We don't have a pineapple carving demonstration scheduled today," I said, pulling out my phone to check the activities calendar. "And the Lido deck is on deck 9. You're on deck 2, crew quarters. How did you get down here?" "I took the elevator, of course." She pointed to the crew elevator, which requires a key card to operate. "I'm staying in cabin 6042. I just want to get to the activities." Cabin 6042 didn't exist. The 6000 series cabins were on deck 6, but they only went up to 6038. I was about to tell her this when she just faded. Not quickly, not dramatically. She just became translucent over the course of about 3 seconds, and then she was gone. Standing one moment, disappeared the next. I stood there, holding my coffee, staring at the empty space where she'd been. My first thought was exhaustion. I'd been pulling 16-hour days. Maybe I was hallucinating. But the coffee station where she'd been standing was still warm, like someone had just been there. I reported it to my supervisor, Martin. He gave me the look, the one that said he thought I was stressed out or pranking him. "Cody, there's no woman. Cameras would have caught her in the crew areas. Get some rest before your shift tonight." But I couldn't shake it. During my afternoon activities session, poolside bingo on deck 9, I kept looking around, watching the passengers. Everyone looked normal, alive, present. Maybe it had been exhaustion. Maybe I had imagined it. That night, at 2 a.m., I was doing a walkthrough of the theater. We'd had a comedy show earlier, and I needed to make sure everything was cleaned and secured for tomorrow. The theater seats 800 people, 3 levels, professional lighting and sound. When empty, it's eerie. All those seats facing a dark stage, silence where hours before there had been laughter. I was checking the upper balcony when I heard music. Not from the sound system, that was off, everything powered down. This was live music, a band playing big band jazz, the kind you'd hear in the 1950s, and voices, lots of them, talking and laughing. I looked down at the theater floor. It was full. Every seat occupied by people in formal wear, men in suits and ties, women in evening gowns, the fashion clearly from decades past. The stage was lit, and a full orchestra played while couples danced in the aisles. The theater was alive with a party that shouldn't exist. I blinked, and it was gone. Empty seats, dark stage, silence, but I could still smell perfume in the air, heavy and floral, the kind older women wore. Over the next 3 days, I saw them everywhere. Always in crew areas, always lost, always asking about activities or cabins that didn't exist. A young couple in 1980s fashion looking for the disco. An elderly man asking about the smoking lounge that had been banned from ships 15 years ago. A family with small children trying to find the arcade that had been converted to a spa in 2015. They were passengers, but they were from different eras of the ship's history. The Carnival Paradise launched in 1998, and apparently everyone who'd ever sailed on her left an echo. Some of them didn't know they were echoes. They thought they were still on their vacation, still enjoying their cruise. I started researching. The ship's records are kept in the purser's office, and I had access for scheduling purposes. I looked up passenger manifests, incident reports, anything that might explain what I was seeing. And I found the pattern. 23 people had died on the Carnival Paradise since 1998. Heart attacks, accidents, 1 murder-suicide in 2004, natural causes. Most died in their cabins and were stored in the morgue until the ship reached port. But some had died in public areas. A man had a heart attack during a show in 2007. A woman fell down the main staircase in 2012. A child drowned in the pool in 2003 despite lifeguards. Every single person I'd seen matched descriptions from those incident reports. The woman in the floral dress, Margaret Sullivan, died of a stroke in 2009, cabin 6042. Wait, that cabin did exist on the old deck configuration before the 2015 renovation. The couple looking for the disco, Frank and Angela Martinez, murder-suicide in 2004 in what used to be the disco but was now a conference room. They were all dead, and they were all still on the ship. I went to the captain, Kenneth Drake, a veteran sailor who'd been working cruise ships for 30 years. I brought my research, my incident reports, my documentation of sightings. I expected him to dismiss me. Instead, he nodded slowly. "You're not the first crew member to notice," he said quietly. "Every ship has ghosts, Cody, especially ships that have been in service as long as Paradise. But we don't talk about it. Bad for business. Passengers get scared. They don't book cruises. The company loses money. So you just ignore it? Pretend people aren't seeing dead passengers wandering around? What else can we do? Exercise a 70,000-ton ship. They're harmless. They don't interact with living passengers. Only crew who are sensitive enough to see them. Most people work here for years and never notice. You're unlucky, or maybe too observant. They're in crew areas," I insisted. "What if they become dangerous?" Captain Drake's expression darkened. "They already have. 3 years ago, a deckhand named Jeremy followed one into a restricted area and fell down a machinery shaft. Broke his neck. The ghost he was following, we think it was a passenger who jumped overboard in 2001, leading people to the same fate." A chill went through me. "And you still didn't do anything?" "We increased security in restricted areas, added more cameras, more warning signs. What happened to Jeremy was tragic, but it was also his choice to follow something he knew wasn't right. You're a smart guy, Cody. You know these things aren't real passengers, so don't follow them, don't engage, just keep doing your job." I tried. For the rest of that voyage, I avoided the ghosts, walked past them when I saw them, pretended they weren't there. But it got harder. More of them appeared, and they were becoming more aware. They'd call my name, reach out to touch my arm, ask me directly for help finding their cabins or their families. The worst was, on the last night before we returned to Miami, I was alone in the crew corridor on Deck 1, the lowest passenger accessible deck. Down here are mostly storage and crew facilities, rarely any reason for passengers to come this far down. I saw a little girl, maybe 6 years old, wearing a swimsuit and carrying a beach ball. She was soaking wet, water dripping from her hair and clothes, leaving puddles on the carpet. She was crying. "I can't find my mommy," she sobbed. "I was in the pool and now I can't find her." I knew who she was. Daniela Chen, 6 years old, drowned in the main pool in 2003. Her parents had looked away for less than a minute. By the time they found her, it was too late. I'd read the incident report. Heartbreaking, the worst kind of tragedy. "Daniela," I said gently, "you need to go back to your cabin." "I don't remember my cabin number. Can you help me find my mommy?" Every instinct screamed at me to help this child, ghost or not, but I remembered Captain Drake's warning about Jeremy. "I can't help you. I'm sorry." Her crying stopped. She looked up at me, and her eyes were wrong, completely black, no whites, no iris. Water poured from her mouth when she spoke, her voice distorted and layered. "Why won't anyone help me? I've been looking for 20 years. 20 years. The lights in the corridor flickered. Water started seeping from under the cabin doors, flooding the hallway. The temperature dropped so fast I could see my breath. Daniela's form flickered, growing larger, more menacing. No longer a sad child, but something angry and trapped. I ran, sprinted down the corridor toward the stairwell. Behind me, I could hear her screaming, the sound of rushing water, doors slamming open. I didn't look back. Made it to the stairwell, slammed the door behind me, and kept running until I reached Deck 5 and the crew quarters. My roommate, Israel, found me sitting outside our cabin, shaking. "Man, you look like you've seen a ghost." "I did," I said. "Multiple ghosts. The ship is full of them." He laughed, thinking I was joking. But I wasn't. And I knew I couldn't work on the Carnival Paradise anymore. Maybe couldn't work any cruise ship, because if one ship was haunted, they all were. Every vessel that had been in service long enough would accumulate its dead, and those dead don't leave. They're trapped, replaying their vacations, looking for help, growing more aware and more angry as years pass. I quit when we docked in Miami, gave my notice, packed my things, and left the cruise industry entirely. My supervisor thought I was having a breakdown. Maybe I was. But I couldn't spend another night at sea surrounded by the dead. Last month, I saw a news article about the Carnival Paradise. A crew member named Rowan had disappeared during a Caribbean voyage. They searched the entire ship, reviewed all camera footage, checked every cabin and restricted area. No trace. It was like he'd vanished into thin air. The official report said he must have fallen overboard, though no one saw it happen and no alarm was raised. But I know what happened to Rowan. He's still on the ship. He's one of them now, another ghost trapped on an endless cruise, asking for help that will never come, wandering crew corridors forever. The Carnival Paradise is still in service, still sailing Caribbean routes, still accumulating ghosts, and the crew is still instructed not to talk about it, to ignore what they see, to pretend the dead passengers don't exist. But they do exist. And if you ever take a cruise, any cruise, on any ship, and you see someone who seems out of place, wearing outdated clothes, asking about activities that don't make sense, walking in areas they shouldn't be able to access, don't engage, don't try to help, and whatever you do, don't follow them, because the ships remember everyone who dies on them, and the dead don't leave. They just wait, trapped forever on voyages that never end, looking for anyone who can see them. And once they know you can see them, they'll never leave you alone. They say archaeologists uncover the past, but what happens when the past doesn't want to be found? My excavation at Çatalhöyük in Turkey taught me that some ancient sites aren't abandoned. They're waiting, and the shadows we disturbed had been patient for 7,000 years. I'm Walter, and I've dedicated my life to archaeology. Got my PhD from Cambridge, spent 15 years working digs across the Mediterranean and Middle East. I've excavated Roman villas, Bronze Age settlements, Neolithic burial grounds. I thought I understood ancient civilizations, thought I knew how to respect the dead and their sacred spaces. Çatalhöyük proved me wrong. Çatalhöyük is one of the oldest human settlements ever discovered, dating back to 7000 BCE. Located in southern Turkey, it was a massive Neolithic town where thousands of people lived in densely packed houses, accessed through roof hatches rather than doors. The site is famous for its elaborate burial practices and mysterious shrines decorated with bull horns and wall paintings. It's been under excavation since the 1960s, revealing layer after layer of human history. I arrived in June 2018 as part of an international team documenting a newly uncovered section, what appeared to be a ceremonial shrine in one of the deeper layers, untouched for 9,000 years. The Turkish government had fast-tracked permits because of the discovery's significance. We had 8 weeks to document everything before the rainy season. The team was small, just 6 of us plus local workers. Our site director was a Turkish archaeologist named Casey, who'd been working Çatalhöyük for a decade. There was Bryce, a British excavation specialist, Remington, an American anthropologist, Adelaide, a French ceramics expert, and Jorge, a Spanish photographer, documenting everything. We all lived in temporary housing near the site, worked dawn to dusk in the brutal Turkish summer heat. The shrine room was incredible. Intact plaster walls covered in red ochre paintings showing human figures surrounded by geometric patterns. Bull skulls mounted along one wall, their horns painted black. And in the center, a burial platform where we found skeletal remains of what appeared to be a shaman or priest, buried with ceremonial objects, obsidian blades, shell beads, and something we'd never seen before in Neolithic contexts. A series of polished black stones arranged in a circle around the body. "Don't photograph those yet," Casey said when Jorge tried to document the stones. "We need to map their exact positions first. They might be significant." But Jorge had already taken several shots. "Got them," he said, reviewing his camera screen. "Wait, that's strange." We gathered around to look. In every photo of the stones, there were shadows. Not normal shadows from our work lights, but human-shaped shadows cast by nothing we could see. In one image, a shadow appeared to be standing directly over the burial, even though no one had been in that position. "Camera glitch," Remington said. "Digital artifacts from the low light." We continued working, carefully excavating around the burial, documenting every detail. The local workers became increasingly uncomfortable as the day progressed. They spoke in rapid Turkish to each other, casting nervous glances at the shrine room. Finally, their foreman approached Casey. "My men don't want to work in that room anymore," he said. "They say it's a bad place. They say the stones are watcher stones, that they were placed to keep something in the burial." Casey was diplomatic but firm. "Tell them we respect their beliefs, but this is an archaeological site. The burial is 9,000 years old. There's nothing to fear." The local workers left anyway, walked off the site despite losing their pay. That should have been our warning. We worked into the evening, too excited by the discovery to stop. As the sun set and shadows lengthened across the excavation, I was carefully brushing dirt away from one of the black stones when my hand brushed against it. The stone was ice cold despite sitting in the sun all day. And the moment I touched it, I felt something, a pulse, a vibration, like the stone was alive. I jerked my hand back. Did anyone else feel that? Feel what? Adelaide was photographing pottery shards nearby. The stone. It's cold, and it's vibrating or something. Bryce came over and touched it himself. "Feels like normal stone to me. Maybe you're dehydrated. This heat is brutal." But I knew what I'd felt. And as darkness fell and we set up work lights to continue documenting, I started noticing the shadows. They moved wrong, not following the light sources but moving independently, shifting positions when no one was looking directly at them. "Jorge," I called out. "Are you seeing this? The shadows?" He was adjusting his camera settings, not paying attention to the room. "Seeing what?" I looked back at the shrine room. The shadows were still now, normal. "Nothing. Never mind." We worked until midnight, finally calling it a day. Back at the housing, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those black stones arranged in their circle, and I felt that cold pulse against my hand. At 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep and reviewed the photos Jorge had uploaded to our shared drive. The shadows were in every image. Not obvious at first glance, but once you noticed them, you couldn't unsee them. Human figures standing around the burial, watching our excavation. In one photo, a shadow stood directly behind Adelaide, so close it looked like it was looking over her shoulder. In another, shadows lined the walls like an audience. I counted them. 12 distinct shadow figures, always in the same positions relative to the burial, no matter what angle the photos were taken from. The next morning, I showed Casey. She studied the images carefully, her expression troubled. "This is unusual. Could be a light phenomenon we're not accounting for, but the consistency is strange. Let's be more careful about documentation protocols." We returned to the site at dawn. The shrine room felt different in daylight, colder, despite the rising temperature outside. The air had a weight to it, a pressure that made breathing difficult. Adelaide complained of a headache. Remington said he felt dizzy. "Maybe there's a gas leak," Bryce suggested. "Underground pockets of methane or carbon dioxide. We should test the air quality." We did. The air was fine. But the feeling of oppression continued. That's when Adelaide started acting strangely. She was documenting a wall painting when she suddenly stopped, brush suspended in midair, staring at the wall like she was seeing something we couldn't. "They're watching us," she whispered. "Who's watching us?" Casey asked gently. "The priests, the ones who are buried here. They can see us disturbing their shrine. They're angry. Adelaide, you're experiencing heat exhaustion. Let's get you out of here, get some water, and shade." But Adelaide didn't move. She stood frozen, staring at the wall. Then she spoke, but not in her voice. The words were guttural, rhythmic, in a language none of us recognized. Ancient syllables that hurt to hear. Jorge was recording. Is she speaking Proto-Anatolian? How would she even know that? She wasn't speaking any recorded language. She was channeling something, and that something was using her voice. The temperature in the shrine room dropped suddenly, dramatically. Our breath came out in visible puffs. The work lights flickered. Casey grabbed Adelaide's arm. "Adelaide, can you hear me? We need to leave this room right now." Adelaide's head snapped toward Casey, but her eyes were wrong, completely black, like her pupils had expanded to fill her entire eye socket. She smiled, but it wasn't Adelaide's smile. "You opened the circle. You broke the binding. Now they're free." Then she collapsed. We carried her out of the shrine room, out of the excavation entirely, into the bright morning sunlight. She came to a few minutes later with no memory of what had happened. I was documenting the wall painting, and then, did I pass out? We should have stopped the excavation right then, should have sealed the shrine room and called for expert consultation, but we were scientists, trained to find rational explanations. We convinced ourselves Adelaide had experienced a seizure, triggered by stress and heat. We went back to work that afternoon. That was our fatal mistake. Bryce was the first to see them clearly. He was photographing the burial remains when he looked up and saw them, figures standing in the shrine room with us. Translucent, flickering, dressed in Neolithic clothing. 12 figures arranged in a circle around the burial, just like the 12 shadow figures in Jorge's photos. "Casey," he said quietly, "tell me you're seeing this." We all saw them. 12 ancient priests dead for 9,000 years, manifesting in the shrine room we'd excavated. They weren't threatening. They just stood there, watching us with expressions of profound sadness. Then one of them spoke. Not out loud. The voice was in our heads, speaking in a language we shouldn't understand, but somehow did. "You removed the watchers. The stones kept him bound. Now he wakes." "Who wakes?" Casey asked. "Who is in the burial?" The priest pointed to the skeletal remains we'd been excavating. The body we'd assumed was a priest or shaman. As we watched, the bones began to move, not falling apart, not scattering, moving with purpose, reassembling. The skull turned to face us, and behind the empty eye sockets, something looked out at us with malevolent intelligence. "He was the first," the priest said. "The first to speak with the darkness, the first to give himself to the void. We bound him here, kept him sleeping under the Watcher Stones for 7,000 years. Now you've freed him." The skeleton stood, bones held together by nothing visible, animated by something that shouldn't exist. It reached toward us with skeletal hands, and where it pointed, shadows spread like stains, shadows that moved on their own, shadows that reached for us with grasping fingers. We ran. All 6 of us scrambling out of the excavation pit, dropping equipment, abandoning years of training that said to protect the site. Survival instinct overrode everything else. Behind us, we could hear it following, the clicking of bones on stone, the whisper of ancient evil freed from its prison. The 12 priests remained in the shrine room, their forms fading, their purpose fulfilled in warning us, even if that warning came too late. We made it to the vehicles and drove to the nearest town, called the Turkish authorities, tried to explain what had happened. They thought we were suffering mass hallucination, perhaps from contaminated water or psychoactive mold spores. They sent a team to investigate the site. The team found nothing. The shrine room was empty. The burial remained, but the bones were arranged exactly as we'd first found them. No sign of disturbance. The black stones were still in their circle. Everything appeared normal, except for Jorge's photographs. Every image from that final day showed the same thing. 12 priests in a circle, and in the center, a darkness that the camera could capture but the human eye couldn't initially perceive. A human-shaped void where the skeleton had stood. We were banned from the site. The Turkish government shut down that sector of the excavation, claiming structural instability. But I know the truth. They sealed it because we'd released something, and they couldn't explain or contain it. Adelaide never recovered fully. She left archaeology, moved back to France, stopped answering emails. Bryce developed severe anxiety and couldn't enter enclosed spaces anymore. Remington started drinking heavily. Casey retired from fieldwork entirely. And Jorge, he disappeared 6 months later, went missing from his apartment in Barcelona. Police found his camera with thousands of photos from Çatalhöyük, including ones taken after we left the site. Images of that skeletal figure in various locations around Turkey, always in shadows, always watching. The last photo showed Jorge's own apartment taken from his camera on a tripod, and standing behind Jorge, visible only as a shadow on the wall, was the skeleton, the first priest, the one we'd freed. I don't do field work anymore. I teach now, safe university lectures about ancient civilizations, but I tell every student the same thing. Not everything buried should be uncovered. Some sites are sealed for a reason. Some graves aren't meant to be disturbed. And if you ever excavate a burial surrounded by stones, arranged in a deliberate circle, leave it alone. Don't photograph it. Don't touch the stones. Because those aren't decorations or ceremonial objects. They're chains. And some things should stay bound forever. Your car breaks down in the middle of nowhere, miles from help, and you're relieved when you see someone in the distance walking toward you, until you realize they're wearing your exact clothes, walking with your exact gait, and when they get close enough, they have your face. The Bonneville Salt Flats in Utah are known for mirages and optical illusions, but what happened to me there in July 2019 wasn't an illusion. It was something far worse. I'm Ellis, a travel writer specializing in America's most isolated and unusual locations. I've written articles about ghost towns in Nevada, abandoned military bases in the desert Southwest, forgotten highways that don't appear on modern maps. My whole career is built on finding places most people will never see, and documenting them for readers who crave the strange and remote. The Bonneville Salt Flats had been on my list for years. 30,000 acres of pure white salt crust stretching to the horizon, so flat and featureless it's used for land speed records. I planned a solo trip to photograph the flats at different times of day, capture that otherworldly landscape for an article. I drove out from Salt Lake City in my 10-year-old Honda Civic, not the most reliable vehicle, but all I could afford on a freelance writer's income. The flats are about 2 hours west of the city, right on the Nevada border. You drive on Interstate 80 through increasingly desolate terrain until suddenly the landscape opens up into this blindingly white expanse that looks like another planet. The salt crust is hard enough to drive on, and there are dirt access roads leading out onto the flats themselves. I arrived at noon when the July sun was at its peak, the temperature pushing 105 degrees. The heat created shimmering mirages on the salt surface, pools of water that didn't exist, distant mountains that seemed to float in the air. I knew about the optical illusions, had researched them before the trip. The flats are famous for making you see things that aren't there, distances that are impossible to judge, shapes that shift and change as heat rises off the salt. I parked at the edge and walked out onto the flats with my camera, water bottles, and sunscreen. The salt crust crunched under my boots. The landscape was surreal, perfectly flat white ground, extending in every direction, meeting a pale blue sky at a horizon so distant and hazy it seemed to curve. No landmarks, no reference points, just endless white. I spent hours photographing from different angles, watching how the light changed the appearance of the salt. At 3 p.m., I headed back toward where I'd parked. That's when I discovered my car was gone. Not stolen. I could see tire tracks leading away, my own tire tracks, heading further out onto the flats in a direction I definitely hadn't driven. I followed the tracks for maybe a quarter mile until I found my car sitting in the middle of nowhere. Doors locked, keys not in the ignition where I'd left them but sitting on the dashboard. That was strange, but not impossible. Maybe I'd been disoriented, parked here and walked further than I thought. The heat was intense, and the complete lack of landmarks made distance impossible to judge. I unlocked the car and tried to start it. Click, click, click. Dead battery. I popped the hood. The battery terminals were corroded, something that had been building for months, but chose this moment to finally kill the battery completely. My phone showed 1 bar of signal, enough to call AAA. The operator said it would be at least 2 hours for a tow truck to reach my location, possibly longer. She advised me to stay with the vehicle, drink water, stay in whatever shade I could find. Shade. On the salt flats. The only shade was inside my car, which was rapidly becoming an oven despite me leaving all the doors open. I set up my emergency sunshade against the side of the vehicle and sat in its narrow shadow, sipping water, waiting. That's when I saw him. A figure in the distance walking across the flats toward me. A person, which was odd because I hadn't seen any other vehicles. But I was relieved. Maybe someone who could help, give me a jump start, or at least keep me company while I waited for the tow truck. The figure got closer, and I started to feel uneasy. Something about the way they moved was familiar. The gait, the posture, even the way they carried themselves. As they got within 100 yards, I could make out more details. They were wearing jeans and a blue button-down shirt, exactly like mine. Same hiking boots, same baseball cap, same camera bag slung over their shoulder. 50 yards away, and I could see their face. My face. It was me, walking toward myself across the Bonneville Salt Flats. I stood up, my heart hammering. This wasn't possible. Heat stroke, dehydration, some kind of hallucination brought on by the extreme conditions. I drank more water, splashed some on my face, blinked hard. When I looked again, the figure was still there, still walking toward me, still wearing my face. 30 yards, 20. I could see every detail now. Not just similar, identical. Same scar on the left eyebrow from a childhood accident. Same slightly crooked nose. Same everything. It was like looking in a mirror, except this reflection was walking independently across the salt. 10 yards away, it stopped, stood there looking at me with my own eyes. Then it smiled, and something about that smile was wrong. Too wide, too knowing, like it understood something I didn't. "Who are you?" My voice came out as a croak. It tilted its head, studying me. When it spoke, it had my voice, but not my inflection. "I'm Ellis. I'm a travel writer. I broke down on the salt flats." "Who are you?" "I'm Ellis. This is my car, my equipment, my—" "No," it interrupted, still smiling that wrong smile. "This is my car, my equipment. You're the copy. You're the mirage." A chill ran through me, despite the heat. "That's not true. I know who I am. I drove here from Salt Lake City this morning. I have my wallet, my ID, my memories." "So do I," it said. "Every memory you have, I have. Every experience, every thought. The question isn't who's real. We're both real. The question is which one of us survives." It started walking toward me again. I backed away, circling around my car, keeping the vehicle between us. "Stay away from me. I don't know what you are, but you're not me." "The salt flats are a thin place," it said, still advancing slowly, calmly. The heat, the emptiness, the absolute flatness. It creates conditions where reality gets thin. Sometimes it creates mirages, harmless illusions. Sometimes it creates something more, duplicates. Copies that are perfect down to the atomic level. Same memories, same consciousness, both convinced they're the original, That's impossible. Is it? You can't explain me any other way. And here's what happens next, Ellis. One of us will leave when the tow truck arrives. One of us will continue living your life, writing articles, paying your bills, calling your mother on Sundays. And one of us will stay here in the salt flats. We'll dissolve back into the heat and the salt and the empty air. Can you guess which is which? I looked around desperately. The salt flats stretched endlessly in every direction. No help, no witnesses, just me and this impossible copy of myself. When the tow truck comes, they'll see both of us. They'll know something's wrong. It laughed, my laugh but colder. Will they? Or will they see one person standing by a broken-down car? That's the thing about duplicates, Ellis. Reality can only sustain one of us. As we get closer to other people, to witnesses, one of us will start to fade. The universe will choose which one is real and which one is the copy. And I don't think it's going to be you. I pulled out my phone to call for help, to get someone on the line who could verify I was real. But the phone showed no signal now. The single bar I'd had earlier was gone. I was alone with my double on the most isolated, featureless landscape in America. Why are you doing this? I asked. If we're the same person, why would you want to erase me? Survival instinct, it said simply. One of us gets to continue existing. One of us becomes nothing. I choose existence. It lunged at me. I dodged around the car, running out onto the salt flats. Behind me, I heard it following, footsteps crunching on the salt crust, exactly matching my own stride. I ran with no destination, no plan, just the animal instinct to flee. The sun beat down mercilessly. My lungs burned. I'd left my water by the car. The heat was overwhelming, and the perfectly flat terrain made it impossible to know how far I'd run. I looked back and saw my double still following, not running anymore, just walking with steady determination. It knew I couldn't run forever. I stopped, hands on knees, gasping for breath. When I looked up, there were two of them, two copies of me, approaching from different directions, then 3, 4. Everywhere I looked, I saw myself multiplying across the salt flats. Dozens of me, hundreds, all walking toward my position with that same wrong smile. I closed my eyes, sure I was hallucinating now. Heat stroke had to be setting in. None of this was real. When I opened my eyes, there would be nothing but empty salt flats. When I opened them, the copies were gone. All except one, standing 10 feet away. The heat makes you see things, it said quietly. Makes you confused. Makes you doubt what's real. Perfect conditions for me to replace you. I won't let you. You don't have a choice. In the distance, I heard an engine. The tow truck arriving early. My salvation or my doom, depending on which of us reality chose to keep. We both started walking toward the sound. Side by side, two identical people crossing the salt flats. As we got closer to my car, to the approaching tow truck, I started to feel strange. Lighter, less solid. I looked down at my hands and saw them beginning to fade, becoming translucent. No, I whispered. No, I'm real. I'm the original. That's what I thought too, my double said. Before I started to fade. Before I realized I was the copy all along. The tow truck pulled up next to my Honda. A man in coveralls got out, looking at my car, not seeming to notice two people standing there. He called out, "Ellis, you called about a dead battery?" My double answered, "Yeah, that's me. Thanks for coming out." I tried to shout to make him see me, but no sound came out. I was fading faster now, becoming translucent as vapor. The tow truck driver walked right past me, didn't see me, looked only at my double, who was solid and real and becoming more so every second. "This is my car," I tried to say, but I had no voice anymore. My double looked at me one last time. "I'm sorry," it said, and maybe it meant it, but I want to live, and the salt flats have chosen which of us is real. I felt myself dissolving, becoming part of the heat shimmer rising off the white salt. The last thing I saw was my double, the other Ellis, getting into my car after the tow truck driver jump-started the battery, driving away toward Salt Lake City, toward my apartment, my life, my identity. And I was alone on the Salt Flats, not even a ghost anymore. Just a memory of a person who might never have existed at all, except I'm still here, still aware somehow, trapped in this endless white expanse, unable to leave, unable to interact with the rare visitors who come to the flats. I see them sometimes, photographers, tourists, land speed racers, and sometimes I see what happens to them. Sometimes the heat creates copies. I watch as people encounter their doubles, watch the same horror and confusion I experienced. Watch as reality chooses which version to keep and which to dissolve into the salt. Last month, a woman broke down in almost the exact spot where my car died. Young, maybe mid-20s, traveling alone. Watched as her double approached, watched the same confrontation play out. She fought harder than I did, refused to accept that she might be the copy. But when witnesses arrived, reality made its choice. She faded just like I did. Now she's here too, trapped in the flats with me and all the others. We're the copies that weren't chosen, the versions that reality rejected, ghosts of people who still exist somewhere else, living the lives we thought were ours. And we wait. Because sometimes, not often but sometimes, a copy is chosen over the original. Sometimes the person who fades is the real one, and the duplicate gets to continue existing. When that happens, the real person joins us here, and the copy goes on living their life, never knowing they're not who they think they are. I don't know which I am anymore. Original or copy. Real or mirage. The Salt Flats don't care about the distinction. They just hunger for the duplicates they create, collecting them, trapping them in this thin place where reality breaks down. If you ever visit the Bonneville Salt Flats, be careful. Don't go alone. Don't let your car break down. And if you see someone in the distance who looks familiar, who moves like you, who has your face, run. Run back to civilization, back to witnesses and solid reality. Because the Salt Flats are patient. They'll wait for you to be alone, vulnerable, confused by heat and isolation. And then they'll ask reality a simple question. Which version of you is real? And you might not like the answer. Some places accumulate so much death that the ground itself becomes poisoned, and stepping foot there means accepting a curse you can't escape. When I illegally trespassed on Poveglia Island, where 160,000 plague victims are buried, I thought the only risk was getting arrested, but within hours, my body started showing symptoms of the Black Death, even though every medical test said I was perfectly healthy. My name is Saint, and I make my living as a social media influencer. I know how that sounds, but hear me out. I have 3.2 million followers across platforms, and brands pay me serious money to create content in unique locations. My niche is extreme travel, going to places most people will never see. Chernobyl exclusion zone, North Korea, abandoned Soviet military bases. The more forbidden and dangerous, the better my engagement numbers. Poveglia Island had been on my target list for 2 years. It's a small island in the Venetian lagoon, about 20 minutes by boat from Venice proper. Completely uninhabited, off-limits to visitors, patrolled by Italian authorities, who will fine and arrest trespassers. The island's history is nightmare fuel. Used as a quarantine station during multiple plague outbreaks from the 14th to 18th centuries, over 160,000 victims were burned and buried there. The soil is reportedly 50% human ash. In the 1920s, they built a psychiatric hospital on the island that operated until 1968, with legends of a mad doctor who performed lobotomies on patients before throwing himself from the bell tower. Perfect content. I could already see the video title, 24 Hours Alone on the World's Most Haunted Island. They tried to stop me. Easy million views, maybe 2 million. I flew to Venice in September 2020, during COVID when tourism was down and enforcement was lighter. I'd researched the patrol patterns. Knew the Italian Coast Guard checked the island twice daily, but not at night. I hired a water taxi driver, who asked no questions for the right price, had him drop me on the southern shore at midnight with camping gear, camera equipment, and enough supplies for 24 hours. The moment I stepped onto Poveglia, I felt wrong. The air was thick, heavy, like breathing through wet cloth. The smell hit me immediately. Decay and something chemical, antiseptic, like old hospital corridors. The island is overgrown now, nature reclaiming the abandoned buildings. Trees and vines cover everything, but you can still see the structures underneath. The hospital, the quarantine station, the bell tower rising against the night sky. I set up my first camera angle, doing my standard intro. What's up, everyone? It's Saint, and I'm doing something absolutely insane tonight. I'm on Poveglia Island, the island of death, where over 160,000 plague victims are buried. This place is completely forbidden, totally illegal to visit, and supposedly cursed. I'm spending the next 24 hours here alone, and we're going to see if the legends are true. Let's go. I explored the hospital first, filming everything. The buildings are dangerous, floors collapsing, walls crumbling, asbestos and lead paint everywhere. But the decay made for incredible visuals. Old hospital beds rusted and overturned. Medical equipment from the 1960s scattered across rooms, graffiti covering walls. I found what locals claim was the lobotomy room, a surgical theater with restraint tables still bolted to the floor. 3 hours in, around 3 a.m., I started feeling strange. A tickling sensation in my throat, mild at first, then more pronounced. I coughed a few times, figured it was dust or mold spores from the abandoned buildings. I drank some water and continued filming. By 4 a.m., the cough was worse. My throat felt raw, and I was sweating despite the cool September night. I checked my temperature with the thermometer I'd brought, 99.8 degrees. Slightly elevated, but not concerning. Probably just my body reacting to the environment, the stress of illegal trespassing, lack of sleep. At 5 a.m., as dawn started breaking over the lagoon, I felt the first lymph node swell. Right side of my neck, below my jaw. I touched it and felt a hard lump that hadn't been there before, painful when pressed. Then another on my left side. Within 30 minutes, I had swollen lymph nodes on both sides of my neck and under my armpits. I knew enough history to recognize what these symptoms mimicked. Bubonic plague. The swollen lymph nodes are called buboes, the disease's signature symptom. But that was impossible. Bubonic plague still exists but is incredibly rare, treatable with antibiotics, and not something you just spontaneously develop. I was starting to panic. I called my emergency contact, my brother Cash, back in the States. Something's wrong. I'm having some kind of allergic reaction or infection. The lymph nodes in my neck are swelling. Get off that island now, he said. Get to a hospital in Venice. I can't. The water taxi isn't coming back until tonight. I'm stuck here until 8 p.m. Then call the Italian Coast Guard. Tell them you're having a medical emergency. I'll get arrested. Massive fines. Maybe jail time. Better than dying on a plague island, Saint. He was right, but I hesitated. I was young, healthy, had no underlying conditions. This was probably just my immune system overreacting to something in the environment. I'd wait a few hours, see if the symptoms improved. I had my first aid kit with antihistamines and pain medication. By 7 a.m., I had a fever of 100 degrees. The buboes were visibly swollen now, painful lumps distorting the shape of my neck and armpits. My joints ached. I felt weak, dizzy. I took more medication and forced myself to drink water. At 9 a.m., I noticed the discoloration. The skin around the buboes was darkening, turning a purplish black. Not bruising, something else. Something that looked exactly like the historical descriptions of plague symptoms I'd read while researching the island. Black patches spreading from the swollen lymph nodes. The origin of the name Black Death. I was terrified now. I called the Italian emergency number, told them I was on Poveglia having a medical emergency. They said a boat would be there within 30 minutes, that I'd be taken to a hospital, and also arrested for trespassing, but medical treatment came first. The Coast Guard arrived 20 minutes later. 2 officers, both looking angry and concerned. They saw my condition, and their expressions changed from anger to alarm. They got me onto their boat immediately, radioed ahead to have an ambulance waiting. At the Venice hospital, doctors examined me urgently. They took blood samples, swabbed the buboes, did a full workup. I explained my symptoms, where I'd been. The doctors exchanged glances. "We're testing for Yersinia pestis, the bacteria that causes plague," one doctor told me in English. "But I must tell you, we see maybe 1 case every few years in all of Italy, and never with symptoms presenting this rapidly." The test came back 6 hours later. Negative. No plague bacteria. No bacterial infection at all. Blood work normal. White blood cell count normal. Every test showed I was completely healthy, but I wasn't healthy. The fever was 103 degrees now. The buboes were larger, more painful. The black discoloration had spread. I was coughing badly, and I'd started coughing up blood, another plague symptom, indicating the pneumonic form. "This doesn't make sense," the doctor said, looking at my test results and then at my obviously diseased body. "You have no infection, no pathogen we can detect, but you're displaying advanced symptoms of bubonic plague transitioning to pneumonic plague. It's as if your body believes it has the disease and is manifesting symptoms without the actual bacteria present." "Psychosomatic?" I asked. "To this degree?" "Impossible. You can't psychosomatically create a fever of 103 swollen lymph nodes this size, or cough up blood. But we can't find any physical cause for your symptoms either." They tried treating me with antibiotics anyway, in case their tests had somehow missed the infection. Nothing changed. They tried fever reducers, anti-inflammatories, steroids. Nothing worked. My condition continued deteriorating exactly as if I had plague, following the historical progression documented in medieval texts. On the second day in the hospital, a priest came to my room. Not a hospital chaplain, a priest who specialized in what he called spiritual afflictions. "The doctors asked me to speak with you," he said in heavily accented English. "They are confused by your case, but I am not. You went to Poveglia, yes?" "Yes, that's where this started." "Poveglia is not just haunted, young man. It is cursed. The ground there is saturated with plague death. 160,000 souls who died in agony. Their bodies burned and scattered across that island. That much death, that much suffering. It leaves a mark on a place, a spiritual contamination. You're saying the island cursed me? That's not real. Then explain your symptoms. You have plague without the bacteria. Your body is experiencing something that medical science says isn't there. This is not illness. This is memory. The island's memory infecting you. How do I stop it?" The priest looked grim. "Others have been affected by Poveglia over the years. Urban explorers, trespassers like you. Most experience minor symptoms, nightmares, brief illness, psychological distress. But some, those who spent significant time there, who truly violated the sanctity of that mass grave. The island doesn't let them go. Their bodies continue manifesting plague symptoms until they die, exactly as if they'd lived during the Black Death." "How many have died?" "4 that I know of, over the past 20 years. All young people who spent the night on Poveglia. All developed plague symptoms with no bacteria. All died within 2 weeks. I felt my blood run cold despite the fever. There has to be a way to break it. There is one thing we can try: confession and blessing. You violated a sacred burial ground, disturbed the dead. You must ask forgiveness, receive absolution. Sometimes that's enough to break the spiritual connection. I wasn't religious, but I was desperate. The priest performed a confession, then a blessing ceremony in my hospital room. He used holy water from Venice's basilicas, prayers in Latin, rituals from medieval plague times. I felt ridiculous but hopeful. The symptoms didn't improve. By day 3, I was critically ill. The plague progression had reached the final stages. Pneumonic symptoms severe, fever at 105 degrees Celsius, multiple organs beginning to fail. Doctors said if I were actually infected with plague bacteria, I'd have maybe 48 hours left. Since I wasn't infected, they had no idea what would happen. My brother Cash flew from the States, arrived on day 4. I was barely conscious by then, the fever causing delirium. He held my hand and cried, which I'd never seen him do before. "I'm dying from a plague that doesn't exist," I whispered. "My body is killing itself with a memory." That night, I dreamed. Not random fever dreams, but specific vivid visions. I saw Poveglia during the Black Death, ships arriving filled with dying passengers, people with buboes being quarantined in buildings, pyres burning bodies day and night. I saw the ash falling like snow coating the island. I saw 160,000 deaths, felt their fear and agony, their desperation as they realized no help was coming. And I understood. Poveglia had absorbed all that death, all that plague energy. I'd walked across ground made of human ash, breathed air thick with centuries of disease. The island had recognized me as an intruder, a violator, and had infected me with its memory. I was experiencing what those 160,000 people experienced, dying the way they died. When I woke on day 5, the fever had broken. The buboes were shrinking. The black discoloration was fading. Within 24 hours, all symptoms were gone. Medical tests still showed nothing wrong, and now there were no symptoms either. I'd recovered from an illness I never technically had. The priest returned. "You survived. Very few do. Poveglia chose to release you." "Why? What changed?" "I don't know. Perhaps you suffered enough to satisfy the debt. Perhaps the island showed mercy. Or perhaps—" He hesitated. "Perhaps it let you go so you could warn others. Living testimony is sometimes more powerful than another death." I was released from the hospital after 2 more days of observation. The Italian authorities fined me $10,000 for trespassing on Poveglia, but didn't press criminal charges, probably because my medical crisis had been punishment enough. I never posted the footage from the island, deleted all of it. My followers demanded to know what happened, why I'd gone silent during what I'd advertised as a major event. I told them I'd gotten sick and had to cancel. Lost a lot of followers from that, lost sponsorship deals. My social media career took a major hit, but I don't care. I survived something that shouldn't exist, was infected by the memory of a plague island, and lived. Others haven't been so lucky. Last month, I saw a TikTok video from an influencer named Maggie who'd snuck onto Poveglia for content. In the video, she was exploring the hospital, laughing about the creepy atmosphere, making jokes about ghosts. In one shot, I saw her scratch her neck absently. In another, she coughed. I messaged her immediately. "Get off that island now. Go to a hospital. You're in danger." She never responded. 2 weeks later, her account went silent. I searched Italian news. A 23-year-old British tourist had died in a Venice hospital of unexplained illness, presenting as pneumonic plague, though no infection was detected. Maggie. Poveglia is still there, still forbidden, still cursed. And people still try to visit because they don't believe the warnings, think it's just superstition and legend. But it's not. The island remembers it's dead. And if you disturb them, it will make you remember too. It will infect you with centuries of plague death, make your body live through what 160,000 souls experienced. Some places are forbidden for a reason. Some ground is too poisoned to walk upon. And some curses are real, no matter what medical science says. I survived. But I carry Poveglia with me now. Nightmares of plague pits, the smell of burning bodies, the memory of dying from a disease that no longer exists but will never truly be gone. Stay away from Poveglia. The island is patient, and it's always hungry. There's a town in Pennsylvania that's been burning underground for over 60 years, where smoke rises through cracks in the earth, and the temperature beneath your feet can reach 1,000 degrees. But the real horror isn't the fire. It's what survived in the heat. When I went to research Centralia's abandoned town hall for a historical article, I discovered that some of the residents who refused to evacuate in the 1980s didn't die in the flames. They changed, and they're still living in the tunnels beneath the burning streets, keeping records of everyone who enters their domain. My name is Malcolm, and I'm a freelance journalist specializing in American ghost towns and environmental disasters. I've documented dozens of abandoned communities across the country, mining towns gone bust, flood-destroyed villages, places evacuated due to contamination. Each location tells a story of human ambition, natural forces, and the fragility of civilization. Centralia, Pennsylvania, had always been the crown jewel on my bucket list. Everyone knows the basic story. In 1962, a coal mine fire started beneath Centralia, probably from burning trash in an abandoned mine pit. The fire spread through the labyrinth of coal seams under the town, and despite multiple attempts to extinguish it, the fire continued burning. By the 1980s, carbon monoxide levels were dangerous. The ground was collapsing into sinkholes, and the temperature underground reached over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The government condemned the town, offered buyouts, and nearly everyone left. Today, Centralia is mostly empty. A few holdouts remain, but the population dropped from over 1,000 to fewer than 10. What makes Centralia visually striking is the smoke. It rises through cracks in the earth, venting from fissures in the abandoned roads. The famous stretch of Route 61 that runs through town is closed, covered in graffiti, buckled and cracked from the heat below. It's surreal, apocalyptic, and perfect for a photo essay and long-form article. I drove to Centralia in October 2021, arriving in the late afternoon. The town is eerie, streets with no houses, just empty lots where buildings once stood. A few structures remain, mostly abandoned, slowly decaying. The handful of residents who stayed live in widely separated homes, stubbornly refusing to leave. Smoke rises from the ground in dozens of places, and if you put your hand near some cracks, you can feel the intense heat radiating from below. I spent the first few hours photographing the obvious landmarks, the graffiti highway, the smoke vents, the abandoned church. But I was looking for something more, something that would make my article stand out. That's when I remembered reading about the old town hall. The Centralia Town Hall had been the administrative center until the evacuation. According to my research, it was still standing, though abandoned and in disrepair. More importantly, supposedly the town records were still inside. Birth certificates, property deeds, council meeting minutes, all the paperwork of a functioning municipality left behind when the town died. If I could access those records, photograph them, it would add tremendous historical value to my article. I found the building on a back street. 2-story brick structure, windows boarded up, condemned, no entry, signs on the doors. The building was sinking on one side, victim of subsidence from the fire-weakened ground below. Smoke rose from a crack in the parking lot 20 feet away. I checked my surroundings. No one visible, no cars passing. I pried loose a board covering a ground floor window and climbed inside. The interior was what you'd expect from a building abandoned for 40 years. Water damage, mold, debris scattered everywhere. But it was surprisingly intact. I could see the old reception desk, the waiting area with chairs still arranged in rows. A faded sign pointed to records, with an arrow indicating the basement, where the fire burned closest. That should have been my second warning, after ignoring the no entry sign. I found the stairwell and descended carefully, testing each step. The temperature increased noticeably as I went down, from comfortable October weather to warm, then hot. By the time I reached the basement level, it was easily 90 degrees, and I could feel the heat through the soles of my boots. The basement was a maze of file rooms and storage areas, and incredibly, the records were there. Metal filing cabinets lined the walls, stuffed with documents. I started photographing, documenting this unexpected time capsule of a dead town's bureaucracy. That's when I noticed the dates. Some of the files were recent, not 1980s recent, last year recent. I pulled a folder labeled Census Update 2021 and opened it. Inside were handwritten entries, names, addresses, observations. But the addresses were impossible. They were street numbers on roads that no longer had buildings. And the observations were disturbing. Subject exhibits increased heat tolerance, skin texture changing to accommodate environment, integration proceeding successfully. I pulled another file. Population monitoring, active residents. It listed 43 names. Most I didn't recognize, but a few I did. People who'd supposedly evacuated in the 1980s, listed as current status underground, adaptation complete. A third file, labeled surface contacts, had my name. Malcolm Reyes. Along with my arrival time, 4:37 p.m., accurate to the minute. There was a photograph of me taking pictures of the graffiti highway, taken from an angle that suggested someone had been watching from inside one of the abandoned buildings. My blood ran cold despite the heat. Someone was here. Someone was watching and keeping records. Someone knew I'd come to the town hall. I heard footsteps above me. Not the random sounds of a settling building, but deliberate footsteps. Multiple sets, walking across the ground floor, converging on the basement entrance. I looked around frantically for another exit. The basement had small windows near the ceiling, but they were too high and too small. The only way out was the stairs, where the footsteps were coming from. The footsteps started descending. I backed into the file room, trying to hide behind the cabinets. Through the doorway, I saw them emerge from the stairwell. There were 5 of them. They looked human at first glance, but wrong. Their skin had a texture like leather that had been heated and cooled repeatedly, cracked and darkened. Their eyes reflected light strangely, like animals caught in headlights. They moved with strange synchronization, like dancers who'd practiced the same routine for years. The one in front spoke, and I recognized him from old photos I'd found during my research. Shepard Collins, who'd been the town clerk in the 1970s. He should have been in his 80s if he was still alive, but he looked middle-aged, preserved somehow. Malcolm Reyes, he said, his voice raspy and layered with an echo, like multiple voices speaking slightly out of sync. You came for the records. We've been expecting someone eventually. It's been months since the last visitor. I'm leaving, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I didn't mean to trespass. I'll go right now. You've already seen too much. The census files, the adaptation records. You understand now that Centralia isn't dead. It's evolved. You're the residents who refused to evacuate. We are what those residents became. The fire changed us. 60 years of exposure to extreme heat, carbon monoxide, the minerals released by burning coal. Our bodies adapted. We stopped aging, stopped needing food the way we used to. The heat sustains us now. We live in the tunnels, in spaces where no normal human could survive. Another figure stepped forward, a woman whose face I recognized from an old newspaper article, Patricia Moore, a teacher who'd supposedly died in 1983. We keep the town running, Malcolm. Someone has to maintain the records, monitor the fire's progression, document what's happening here. The surface world thinks Centralia is empty, but it's not. It's ours now. How many of you are there? 43 currently. Some of the original holdouts, others who came to investigate over the years and chose to stay, or were made to stay. You're keeping people here against their will. Shepard smiled, revealing teeth that looked like they'd been baked. Not against their will. We offer a choice. Leave and carry our secret, knowing you'll never be believed, and wondering if you should have stayed, or remain here, undergo the adaptation, and become part of something unique. A human population that has evolved to live in conditions that would kill anyone else. I choose to leave. Then you may go, but first, you must be logged." He gestured to one of the others who pulled out a clipboard. An actual clipboard, like this was some bureaucratic procedure. "We document everyone who enters Centralia, everyone who learns our secret. Name, date, duration of stay, what they witnessed, what they took away." The woman, Patricia, approached me with a camera, one of those old Polaroid instant cameras. "We need a photograph for the records." This was insane. Bureaucracy maintained by people who'd been transformed by an underground fire, keeping meticulous records of trespassers in an abandoned town hall. But I cooperated, let them take my photo, watched it develop in that characteristic Polaroid way. Shepard filled out a form on his clipboard. "Malcolm Reyes, journalist, entered town 4:37 p.m., October 15th, 2021. Accessed town hall records at 6:23 p.m. Discovered population files. Encountered adapted residents. Duration of surface visit. 2 days planned. Actual departure tonight. Status, released with knowledge. Probability of return, 43%. "I'm not coming back," I said. "They all say that. Some mean it. Others can't resist. The fire calls to certain people, Malcolm. We'll see which type you are." They escorted me upstairs and out of the building. The October evening felt cold after the heat of the basement, and I gulped fresh air like I'd been suffocating. The 5 figures stood in the doorway of the town hall, backlit by some light source I couldn't identify, watching as I walked quickly to my car. I drove out of Centralia that night, didn't stop until I was 2 towns away. I checked into a motel and tried to process what I'd experienced. Rational explanations fought with what I'd seen. Hermits living in the tunnels, made paranoid and strange by isolation and carbon monoxide exposure. That made sense. But their appearance, their coordination, the way they spoke, that was harder to explain away. I had no physical evidence. I'd been so shocked I hadn't taken any photographs in the basement. No pictures of the files, no images of the adapted residents. Just my memory and my notes. I never wrote the article. How could I? Underground colony of transformed humans keeps census records in burning town would destroy whatever credibility I had as a journalist. I told my editor the story fell through, that Centralia wasn't as interesting as I'd hoped. But I kept the research, and I monitored news about Centralia. Over the past 3 years, 7 people have gone missing after visiting the town. Urban explorers, curious tourists, people who stayed too long or wandered into the wrong areas. Some of their cars were found abandoned. Others disappeared completely. I wonder which ones chose to stay. Which ones are now living in the tunnels, adapted to the heat, keeping records in that basement office, waiting for the next visitor to log into their census. Last month I received a letter, no return address, postmarked from a nearby town. Inside was a Polaroid photograph, me standing in my apartment taken from outside my window. And on the back, written in that same careful handwriting, from the clipboard, Malcolm Reyes. Status update, still surface dwelling, exhibiting signs of return probability. Will be ready when you come back. I haven't gone back. I won't go back. But they're right about one thing. I think about it constantly. Wonder what's happening in those tunnels, what the fire has made them into, whether they're still keeping their meticulous records, whether other towns with similar disasters have similar populations, adapted and hidden, and maintaining the bureaucracy of communities the surface world thinks are dead. Centralia is still burning, will burn for another 250 years, according to estimates, and beneath it, Shepard and Patricia and 41 others are still there, still documenting, still waiting for visitors who stay too long. The fire doesn't just consume, sometimes it transforms. And some transformations are permanent. If stories like this keep you awake at night, if you want to hear more true horror experiences, that will make you question everything you thought you knew about abandoned places and the things that live there. Subscribe to my channel, Haunted Fears. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is. Let's see how many of us are brave enough to face these terrors together. Don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who thinks they're brave enough to handle the truth about what lurks in America's most forbidden locations. I'll see you in the next one, if you dare come back.